Chapter 503. Qian Xianhua thought. Let these female disciples stay here. Perhaps in the near future, many of them would have a chance to become Grand Desolate Masters. As their sect leader, she was happy for them. Therefore, she did not plan to leave immediately. Instead, she contacted the elders in the sect and asked them to bring the Desolate Hunters to other planets to develop. If there was a chance in the future, she would ask the elders to bring the disciples back. Thinking of the Desolate Hunter disciples, before they left, they were the elites of the sect. But by the time they returned, many of the Desolate Hunter disciples in the sect might have become Grand Desolate Masters. I don't know how they should feel. In the following days, Emosher went out every day to kill the general corpses. His evolution points and kill points were also increasing rapidly. Finally, one day, in his mind, the system's familiar voice sounded, "Frowny face kill points have reached 10 billion. Can be upgraded." Emosher said in his mind without hesitation, "Upgrade. This upgrade will take 48 hours." Emosher immediately returned to the first hunting island. He stayed on the first hunting island for 2 days. The system's voice sounded again, "Frowny face upgrade successful." At the same time, Emosher's attributes appeared in his mind. Frowny face name. Emosher, level 10 Desolate Hunter, level 10 Long Nian Shi. Emosher saw it and could not help but feel excited. One more level, and he would become a Grand Desolate Master. There were so many general corpses on the continent. If he kept killing them, he would be able to get enough kill points. According to his previous experience, another upgrade would require 100 billion kill points. Killing 10 general corpses would give him 1 kill point. Then he would have to kill 1 trillion general corpses. There were only 3 trillion humans in the entire Flaming Land. If he really wanted to get so many kill points, it would mean that at least 1/3 of the Flaming Land's population had become general corpses. Emosher shook his head. This would not do. He asked in his mind, "System, is there no other way to upgrade?" If it was in the past, the system would basically remain silent when faced with such a problem, because the system would usually give the best solution. No other choice would be better than the system's solution. But this time, Emosher had not expected it. When he asked this question, the system replied instantly, "Frowny face, there are still 3 options." Emosher was slightly taken aback. Then he hurriedly said, "Tell me quickly." The system's voice sounded, "Frowny face 1. Use all of your current evolution points to upgrade Dragon Palace by 1 level. He could increase the number of refining stations to 100. Each desolate refining platform required 10 days to refine a Grand Desolate Master. As long as the host spends 10 days to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters, the host will automatically level up. From there, you will be promoted to a Grand Desolate Master. Emosher's eyes lit up. That was a good idea. However, he quickly rejected this plan. All of his current evolution points still need to be used to sign in the Demon Suppressing Orb. Currently, the Demon Suppressing Orb was the only thing that could be used by others to deal with corpse generals. What about the second one? Emosher asked. The system's voice sounded again, "Frowny face 2. With the current speed of the Desolate Refining Platform, it will be able to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters in 3 months. At that time, the host will automatically level up." Emosher nodded his head. Yes, this is okay. In other words, even if Emosher didn't do anything in these 3 months, after 3 months he would also level up. At that time, he would directly become a Grand Desolate Master. Other Grand Desolate Masters had to go through untold hardships and hundreds of years to reach the Grand Desolate Master realm. Even if he didn't do anything and just ate, drank, played, and slept, he would still reach the Grand Desolate Master realm in 3 months. If other Grand Desolate Masters knew about this, they would vomit blood. Of course, compared to the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform, Emosher's speed was a lot slower. However, the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform only had the fighting strength of normal Grand Desolate Masters. Although Emosher was only a level 10 Desolate Master, his fighting strength was extremely powerful. He could already challenge level 5 to 6 Grand Desolate Masters. This didn't include the Sea Dragon clones bonus. Thus he didn't envy them. What about the third one? Emosher asked. The system replied frowny face 3. Kill a living giant dragon and devour its blood. You can advance to the Grand Desolate Master realm, which is the giant dragon realm. When Immortal heard this, he was a little speechless. Are there other giant dragons in this world? The system replied frowny face, the universe is big, there are all kinds of strange things. Immortal's eyes lit up and he asked, so there are really places in the universe where giant dragons live? This time, the system didn't reply instantly. It directly fell into silence. However, Immortal had already tasted something from the system's words. The system definitely wasn't randomly giving out such a mission. In that case, it shouldn't take too long for him to see a real giant dragon. The second giant dragon other than himself. Of course, it could also be many giant dragons. And from the looks of it, the system seemed to be deliberately pushing him to the opposite side of the giant dragons. The rope given was called the dragon binding rope, and the saber given was called the dragon slaying saber. Even the evolution had evolved into a bloodthirsty demon dragon. If the other giant dragons knew about it, they might try every means to hunt him down. Thinking of this, Immortal seemed to have seen what kind of battle he would face in the near future. Thinking of this, he felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Just reaching the peak of the flaming beginning continent was far from enough. He had to increase his combat strength to a higher level before he met those giant dragons. Therefore, in the next few days, Immortal didn't wait quietly for more than 3 months to pass. Instead, he kept going outside and slaughtering those general corpses. And now, his methods were even more ruthless and he slaughtered faster. His evolution points were also constantly rising. Gradually, time passed. In more than 3 months, Immortal's kill points had reached more than 1 billion. Obviously, he was still far from reaching 100 billion. However, in these 3 months, he had signed in more than 200 demon-suppressing orbs. With so many demon-suppressing orbs, he felt a little more relaxed. At the same time, on this day, the 100th Grand Desolate Master was refined on the Desolate Refining Platform. In Immortal's mind, a system notification suddenly sounded frowny face after refining 100 Grand Desolate Masters. The host will automatically level up by 1 level. In the next moment, Immortal felt a huge amount of energy suddenly surging through his meridians without any warning. Every cell in his body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Every muscle in his body felt like it was about to be torn apart. Every vein in his body seemed to be about to burst. However, this feeling only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Then his entire body suddenly felt relaxed. Chapter 504. Compared to other level 10 Desolate Hunters who needed decades to become a Grand Desolate Master, Wang Yi's process was much simpler. The process of his cells coming to life, his muscles tearing, and his meridians bursting only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Soon he felt his body relax. It was as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. In his mind, the system's voice also sounded, "Promotion successful." Immortal checked his status. Name: Immortal. Level 1 Grand Desolate Master. Rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon. Level 10 Long Nian ability. Click to expand. Phew, Immortal let out a long breath. He had finally become a Grand Desolate Master. At the same time, according to the Giant Dragon's power system, he had reached rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon. The dragon race's ranks were Giant Dragon, Evolved Giant Dragon, Super Evolved Giant Dragon, Ancient Giant Dragon, Immemorial Giant Dragon, and so on. Immortal's current level of Evolved Giant Dragon could only be considered as a newbie. Immortal was already an invincible existence in the Flaming Land. This promotion had raised his strength to another level. Of course, this was still not enough. Since the system wanted to train him to become a dragon slayer, he had to continue to increase his strength. Now that he had become a Grand Desolate Master, he needed 1 trillion kill points for every level up. Even if all the people in the Flaming Land turned into general corpses, and he killed them all, it would not be enough for him to level up. Thus, there were only 2 methods left. One was to use all his evolution points to level up the Dragon Palace and double the number of refining tables. However, this was not a consideration for now. The last method was to slay a dragon. According to the system, as long as he killed a giant dragon, He could level up to a Grand Desolate Master. Now that he was a Grand Desolate Master, he would need to kill at least 10 giant dragons. In the Flaming Land, there was not a single giant dragon other than himself. Where would he find 10 giant dragons? The system's voice quickly sounded. You only need to kill 1 giant dragon to level up. Immortal was surprised. Oh? Why? The system replied. The host has not killed a real giant dragon, so killing a giant dragon will level up. Consider it a reward for the host. Immortal nodded. Yes, that's a good idea. But where can I find a dragon? The system fell into silence once again. Immortal shook his head. Once the system remained silent, there was nothing he could do. It seemed that he could only fumble around on his own. For the next 2 months, Hunting Island 1 was peaceful. Every 10 days, the number 1 Hunting Island would produce 10 Grand Desolate Masters. Outside of Hunting Island number 1, the entire continent was not peaceful. The Corpse General had already taken over more and more areas. Almost half of the humans on the Flaming Continent had been infected. In the early stages of the zombie infection, many people had the mentality that the fewer people there were, the safer it would be. Just like a zombie infection, once a zombie got into a densely populated city, the whole city would be in an uproar. If a zombie was thrown into a village with only 20 to 30 families, it was very likely that only the village would be infected. Little did they know that this was equivalent to being surrounded by the commander corpses, and then being defeated one by one. By now, people had also realized this. They started huddling together for warmth. At the same time, some cultivators with special attributes such as fire and ice did not die after being infected. Instead, their abilities were greatly improved. After their strength increased, their abilities became the bane of the Corpse General virus. In theory, the Corpse General virus could not be killed. However, cultivators with ice attribute could use their ice attribute energy to freeze the virus. The frozen virus would not be able to break free in a short period of time. As for cultivators with fire attribute, as long as they could raise the temperature of their fire attribute energy to a certain degree, they could directly vaporize the virus. There were also cultivators with lightning attribute energy. Their lightning attribute energy was extremely explosive and destructive. They could vaporize the Corpse General virus with just one blow. There were also cultivators with poison attribute energy. After their energy was strengthened, not only would they be immune to the Corpse General virus, the poison attribute energy in their bodies would also have a strong suppressive effect on the Corpse General virus. Therefore, when almost all the desolate hunters had fled, there were some heroes who specialized in hunting down the Corpse General virus. Of course, such heroes were very few in number. Therefore, they had a very high status in the hearts of the people. In many cities, the people used these heroes as their leaders to set up defensive lines to defend against the Corpse General virus. As a result, many bases of various sizes gradually formed on the Flaming Continent. When Immortal saw these bases, he could not help but shake his head. It turned out that when he came to the Flaming Continent from Earth, he had jumped from a small fire pit into an even bigger one. Immortal had used his draconic will to briefly scan a few bases. The bodies of the leaders of these bases had been strengthened by the Corpse General virus. Their strength had reached the level of a Grand Desolate Master. However, this was clearly far from enough. There were more and more Corpse General virus outside the bases, and the resources in their bases were decreasing. If they wanted to survive, they had to go out frequently to search for resources. This was unavoidable. After more than 2 months, there were more than 1,500 bases on the Flaming Continent. With so many bases, there were naturally more than 1,500 Grand Desolate Masters with special abilities. It was also at this time that the Corpse General virus began to gather and launch a large-scale attack on the human bases. At first, the people were not prepared, and the Corpse General virus easily broke through more than 100 bases. After that, the people began to strengthen their defenses and defend these bases. However, this was only the beginning, because the Corpse General virus would only increase, and with these 1,400 experts, the Corpse General virus could not kill as fast as the Corpse General virus could infect them. Among so many experts, apart from Immortal, The strongest was the sect master of the ancient flame sect, Lori. Emosure had been killing corpse general virus far away from the bases, so no one knew how strong he was. As a result, Lori seemed to have become the strongest person on the continent. With the ancient flame sect as the base, the radius of the base was more than 100 kilometers. Within this range, the corpse general virus did not dare to show its head. If it did, it would be destroyed by Lori. Lori was in the limelight on the entire flaming continent. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall on East End Island. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall, there was a huge pool with a radius of 50 kilometers. The seawater from the surrounding waterfalls all gathered in this huge pool. No one knew where the seawater from the surrounding waterfalls went after gathering in this pool. The pool was dark and deep, like a huge black eye gazing at the sky from the bottom of the sea. On this day, at a certain moment, 5 meters above the pool, the air suddenly distorted. Chapter 505. Sea Heart Waterfall, 5 meters above the deep pool. The space suddenly distorted. Then a huge figure suddenly appeared. This huge figure was about 1,000 meters long. It had a pair of wings on its back. Its long tail was also more than 3 meters long. Its body was covered in black scales. There were ferocious spikes on its head. It was a giant dragon. This giant dragon's wings flapped slightly. Its figure instantly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already 5,000 meters above the Sea Heart Waterfall. It lowered its head and looked down at the entire sea. Its pitch-black dragon eyes kept turning. Just a few seconds later, its wings flapped again. In the next moment, its figure had already disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already more than 1,000 kilometers away. Its wings flapped again. It reappeared more than 1,000 kilometers to the east. Just like that, it flapped its wings a few times and soon explored the area within 1,000 kilometers of the Sea Heart Waterfall. Finally, its figure stopped in the sky above East Pole Island. At the same time, a voice sounded in this giant dragon's right ear. "Kongjio, have we arrived?" The dragon called Empty Nine chuckled and spoke in a human voice. "That's right. We're here." The voice sounded in its right ear again. "Let's see how the creatures there are. We've been away for tens of thousands of years. They must have grown and are not as weak as before." The giant dragon called Kongjio smiled and said, "Then I'll test them." The voice in its right ear said, "Just test them. Don't kill them randomly. Every living thing here had a number. If you kill too many, it'll be troublesome if the higher-ups find out." Kongjio chuckled and said, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." East Pole Island had already built a base called East Pole Base. The East Pole Island Lord did not escape from the flame-beginning continent with the others. Instead, he had been protecting the people on the island. No one would have thought that the East Pole Island Lord, who had always been extremely strict, would live and die with the islanders in this moment of life and death. However, he was unfortunately infected with the corpse general virus in a battle with a general corpse. However, not only did the corpse general virus not turn him into a general corpse, but it also greatly strengthened his body. As a result, his strength had soared to level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Moreover, his body had also evolved to a certain extent. The fire attribute energy in his body could vaporize the corpse virus in a short period of time. Since then, he had led the islanders to build the East Pole Base here. At this moment, the people in the East Pole Base were busy building the base. When someone inadvertently raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a huge figure slowly flapping its wings and floating in the sky. And this huge figure was exactly the same as the giant dragon recorded in legends, ancient murals, and ancient books. The man's eyes widened in shock. His mouth opened slightly. The person next to him noticed this person's strange behavior and followed his gaze. With one look, his eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly. After a while, his Adam's apple moved with difficulty. His lips moved. He wanted to make a sound. However, he realized that his throat was a little dry. His Adam's apple squirmed again with difficulty before he spoke. "I'm sorry." Giant dragon. When the others heard his voice, they all looked up at the sky. With one look, everyone was incomparably shocked. Giant dragon. It's really a giant dragon. This This is a real giant dragon. Is it an illusion? It's impossible. Everyone is hallucinating. This is a real giant dragon. Amidst the shocked cries, everyone prostrated themselves on the ground. In the culture of the Flaming Land, almost every race had a giant dragon as their totem. Giant dragons were the most powerful and mysterious creatures in the universe. Tens of thousands of years ago, there were many giant dragons on this continent. However, for some reason, all the giant dragons disappeared. Some said that a disaster fell from the sky and caused the giant dragons to go extinct. Some said that the giant dragons could not adapt to the changes in the environment. Some said that the giant dragons went to other planets. Regardless of which theory it was, not a single giant dragon had appeared in the Flaming Land for tens of thousands of years. And now, a living giant dragon had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? How could they not prostrate themselves in worship? The East Pole Island Lord heard the commotion, and also came to the courtyard. When he saw the huge figure that was more than 1,000 meters long in the sky, his entire body seemed to tremble. Giant dragon. This was a real giant dragon. Even someone as powerful as him had the urge to kneel down and worship it. At this moment, the giant dragon that was slowly flapping its wings in the sky suddenly retracted its wings. It dove toward the ground. In almost 3 seconds, it dove to the ground from a height of more than 10,000 meters. A pair of front claws clawed toward the ground. Rumble. Its pair of huge claws drew a huge ravine that was more than 1,000 meters long and 100 meters wide on the ground. The hundreds of humans in the ravine were instantly turned into hundreds of corpses under its sharp claws. They were thrown far away. Then its giant tail, which was hundreds of meters long, swept across the area. Rumble. One after another, the buildings collapsed to the ground. Kacha. One by one, the trees were snapped. Ah! The humans screamed in agony. But this time, hundreds of humans were directly sent to the Yellow Springs. The 200,000 humans who were prostrating on the ground were all dumbfounded. They had always been in awe of giant dragons. After this giant dragon appeared, they immediately prostrated themselves in worship. Why was the giant dragon doing this to them? In their panic, they fled in all directions. However, the speed at which they fled was far slower than the speed at which the giant dragon slaughtered them. Every time the giant dragon's tail swept across, at least 100 people would be smashed into meat paste. This scene was even more terrifying than any monster movie. When the East Pole Island Master saw this, he was also terrified at first. Like these humans, he did not know why the giant dragon would suddenly attack these humans. But soon, the fear in his heart was replaced by anger. These humans under his command worshipped the giant dragon so much. Even in their hearts, they did not dare to disobey the giant dragon in the slightest. Some even offered incense to the giant dragon and prayed to it every day. They never imagined that the giant dragon that appeared out of nowhere would treat them like this. In his anger, a fiery red spear condensed in his right hand. This fiery red spear seemed to be condensed from magma. Holding the spear in his right hand, he roared, "Evil dragon, die." As he spoke, he threw the spear in his right hand at the giant dragon. Chapter 506. The magma spear in the East Pole Island Master's hand streaked across a distance of 5,000 meters. Due to the high temperature, the air where the spear streaked across seemed to have been distorted. In almost an instant, the magma spear hit Sherlong's chest. Ding! When the magma spear hit the huge dragon's chest, it was unable to pierce through its scales. Instead, the magma spear broke into 3 pieces after a few cracking sounds. The East Pole Island Master's expression immediately turned extremely grave. One must know that he had already reached the level of a level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Furthermore, due to the strengthening of his body by the corpse general virus, his strength had far surpassed the previous level 8 Grand Desolate Master. According to his estimation, he should be about the same as the previous level 10 Grand Desolate Master. In the end, the magma spear he condensed did not even manage to break through the scales of this huge dragon. However, even so, he could not watch as the people in the base were wantonly massacred by this huge dragon. With a roar, he bent his legs. He stomped on the ground. The next moment, his body soared into the sky like a rocket. At the place where he was previously standing, a ring of fiery red energy spread out in all directions. When he reached an altitude of 10,000 meters, a pair of flaming wings condensed on his back. When the huge dragon saw this scene, it spoke in human language. Kaka, interesting. The energy in the East Pole Island Master's body began to surge out of his body. Soon, his entire body was covered in flames. Then he roared, "Evil dragon, die!" He pushed both his palms toward the evil dragon. As he pushed both his palms forward, all the flames on his body blasted toward the alternative dragon. It was as if a sea of flames had covered the sky and covered the earth. It actually enveloped the 1,000-meter-long evil dragon within it. It was very difficult to imagine how a human could release such a large sea of flames. This situation continued for 5 minutes. When the humans on the ground who were fleeing in panic saw this scene, they all heaved a sigh of relief. However, after 5 minutes, the sigh of relief that they had just heaved a sigh of relief became tense again. That was because the East Pole Island Master's high-intensity flames were slowly retracted, and the sea of flames in the sky gradually disappeared. Only then did they realize that the huge dragon was actually unscathed. It was still flapping its wings slightly as it floated there quietly. Its pair of abyss-like dragon eyes revealed a hint of blood-sucking. Then a human voice came from his throat. However, this voice was hoarser than a human's. It sounded like someone was sawing wood. "It's my turn." As it spoke, the giant dragon opened its huge mouth. Boom! A burst of flames immediately shot toward the East Pole Island Master. Although this sea of flames was not as large as the one released by the East Pole Island Master earlier, it was still far more powerful. However, the East Pole Island Master was still able to sense that the flames contained an extremely dangerous sensation. He hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he covered his entire body with fiery red energy. In the next moment, he was engulfed by the flames. When the flames spewed out by the dragon disappeared, the East Pole Island Master had long been burned to a crisp. Falling from the sky, bang! He landed on the grass. His body was still emitting thick smoke. Several of his subordinates hurried over. Under their probing, the East Pole Island Master no longer had any signs of life. "Island Master is dead," one of them exclaimed. "Island Master is dead. Island Master is dead." Many people nearby screamed out in horror. Since the outbreak of the zombie virus in the apocalypse, the East Pole Island Master had been protecting their safety. He led them to build a base and led them to repel the attacks of the zombie soldiers again and again. In their hearts, the Island Master was their hero. The Island Master was their savior. But now, the Island Master was actually killed by this evil dragon. The flames of anger in their hearts rose. However, in the face of such a huge mysterious creature, a totem that they had always worshipped, they could not summon the slightest thought of fighting back. In the sky, the evil dragon killed the East Pole Island Master. It let out a guffaw of laughter. "Keek keek keek. How dare a mere low-level creature make an enemy out of a giant dragon?" Then it opened its mouth again and spewed flames toward the ground. Boom! The fire began to burn on the East Pole Island. The more than 200,000 people on the East Pole Island were screaming and rolling in pain in the fire. The evil dragon in the sky let out a guffaw of laughter. It was like a child pouring boiling water into a colony of ants. In the end, the 200,000 people on the island were all burned to a crisp. No one was spared. Decades later, someone set foot on the island. The burned people could be seen everywhere. Some were curled up into balls. Some were rushing toward the sea. Some were carrying children. The situation was extremely horrifying. At this moment, the giant dragon disappeared in a flash after slaughtering the 200,000 people. When it reappeared, it was already in the sky. It lowered its head and glanced at the billowing smoke on the East Pole Island below. It chuckled twice. Then, with a slight flap of its wings, it was thousands of kilometers away. In the next 3 days, 5 or 6 bases were destroyed by the giant dragon every day. Of these 5 or 6 bases that were destroyed, not a single person survived. For a time, the entire Flaming Dawn continent was in a state of panic. The corpse general virus was already enough for them. It was not easy for them to build a base under the leadership of various heroes. But now, A giant dragon had appeared out of nowhere and easily destroyed several bases. Its destructive power was even more terrifying than the zombie virus. If this continued, would it not be long before it could destroy all the bases on the continent? At the same time, these people could not understand. Why would a creature that they had always worshipped as totems be so cruel? On Hunting Island number 1, Emosher's heart skipped a beat when he saw this news. Could it be that the system had predicted that an evil dragon would suddenly break into the Flaming Dawn continent and wreak havoc when it asked him to slay the dragon? Since slaying a giant dragon could increase his level by 1 level, of course he had to give it a try. On this day, the giant dragon came to the sky above another base. The people in the base had long been on guard. They had already activated the energy light shield. This khaki-colored energy light shield was like a huge bowl that covered the base. They knew that the giant dragon's destructive power was great, so they had specially reinforced this light shield. And the degree of reinforcement was extremely abnormal. It could completely withstand the simultaneous attacks of more than 20 Grand Desolate Masters. The giant dragon slowly flapped its wings and floated in the air. It was like an eagle overlooking its prey. At this moment, a voice sounded in its right ear. "Kongjio, are you messing around again?" The giant dragon chuckled twice. "How am I messing around? I'm just here to do research. Don't you dare slander me." The voice came from the other side. "I'm a F** king male dragon. Why would I slander you? Don't force human words on me." Chapter 507. In the sky, the voice in the black dragon's right ear said, "Kongjio, don't mess around. If you kill too many, the higher-ups will find out. Then both you and I will face punishment." The black dragon seemed very impatient. I know. It's not easy to come out, and I still have to listen to your nagging. Annoying." After that, the black dragon hung up and disappeared again in a flash. When it reappeared, it was already thousands of kilometers away. In the next 2 days, the black dragon was still wandering around the flaming beginning continent. It did not go to the bases to kill. Instead, it kept wandering in the wilderness. But when it encountered lone humans in the wilderness, it would still reach out its claws without hesitation. Of course, those general corpses could not escape its claws. As long as it encountered creatures in the wilderness, no matter if they were general corpses or humans, it would kill them. On this day, it saw a mountain in the distance. This mountain was about 10,000 meters high. The entire mountain was covered in a layer of earthy yellow light. A base was formed around this mountain, within a radius of 100 kilometers. There were far more humans in this base than in other bases. But to its surprise, the base's walls were not high and did not look very sturdy. But there were not many general corpses in such a place. It even seemed that the general corpses were very afraid of this place. It seemed that they were afraid of something on this mountain. This made Kongjio a little confused. "What the hell is on this mountain? Why don't you let me take a look?" As he spoke, he circled around the base. The people in the base also noticed the black dragon. These days, the news of this evil dragon had spread throughout the continent. When people saw this evil dragon, they all cried out in surprise. "Evil dragon! The evil dragon is attacking! Hide underground! Open the door of the shelter, quick!" Kongjio could not help but laugh out loud when he heard the words shelter. "Ha ha ha ha! You lowly creatures, are you trying to make me laugh to death? Shelter? I'll make you feel lonely." As he spoke, he swept down from the sky. A pair of thick hind claws viciously clawed at the ground. 2 huge ravines that were 1,000 meters long and 70 to 80 meters wide suddenly appeared on the ground. Rumble! The so-called air raid shelter that the humans had just called was instantly destroyed. All the humans screamed and fled in all directions. The power of giant dragons was completely foreign, mysterious, and powerful to these humans. Many of them had cultivated for decades or even centuries. He thought that he was already very strong. But in front of this huge dragon, they were like a bunch of ants. The air raid shelter that they thought was impregnable was like an ant's nest in front of this giant dragon. This giant dragon didn't even use energy. Just its physical strength alone was enough to destroy everything. This filled their hearts with despair. Rumble, rumble, the evil dragon continued to wreak havoc. There was only one thing it loved in its life, and that was destruction. His superiors did not allow him to wreak havoc on this continent. He had been holding it in for a few days and had long been suffocated. It just so happened that there were many humans around the mountain today, so he decided to indulge himself for a day. With a swing of its giant tail, a large number of houses were destroyed amidst a cloud of dust. Hundreds of humans were sent flying. With a swing of its sharp claws, huge ravines appeared on the ground. It was as if there were huge wounds on the ground. Amidst the rumbling sounds of buildings being destroyed, amidst the screams of the humans before they died, the evil dragon let out a laugh that sounded like sawing wood. Ha 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 ha. It was as if its perverted mind was satisfied amidst the destruction. At this moment, when these people were facing the end of the world, a voice suddenly sounded. Bastard! How dare you come to the flame-beginning ancient sect to cause trouble? You're courting death. Everyone looked up. In the sky, a figure was floating there. It was a lowly who looked to be about 12 or 13 or 14 years old. She had a pair of ponytails. Her appearance was very lovable. However, the way she spoke did not look like a lowly. Instead, she looked like a rough man. However, everyone knew that this person was none other than the sect master of the flame-beginning ancient sect, Luoli. A pair of angel-like energy wings grew from her back as she floated in the air. In front of the 1,000-meter-long giant dragon, she seemed so small. However, at this moment, in the hearts of these humans, her figure was so tall. When the giant dragon saw that this human was so daring, it sneered. A mere ant dares to be so arrogant in front of a giant dragon. Let me see what you're capable of. Luoli did not hesitate. In this world, there hasn't been a dragon slayer. I'll be the first one. As she said that, she moved her mind. A surge of dark green energy gushed out from behind her. This energy quickly condensed and took form behind her back. Soon, it condensed into a 1,000-meter-tall giant energy shadow. This giant energy shadow condensed a 2,000-meter-long giant spear in its right hand. Those who did not see this scene would never be able to imagine how shocking this scene was. This 1,000-meter-tall giant seemed to be connected to the sky and earth. The spear in its hand seemed to be able to pierce through heaven and earth. At a certain moment, this giant shadow roared. The spear in its right hand viciously pierced toward the giant dragon's chest. Puff! With a loud sound, the giant dragon was directly pierced by the giant spear. When everyone saw this scene, they were all delighted. It hit. It hit. After the giant shadow pierced the giant dragon, it slowly disappeared. Only the giant dragon in the sky was left. In the giant dragon's chest, there was a 20-meter-wide giant hole. Blood fell from the sky like a waterfall. On the ground, a huge pool of blood quickly formed. In the pool of blood, blood mist lingered and blood chi overflowed. It looked very terrifying. The giant dragon's body was also constantly trembling. It seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Luoli snorted coldly. A mere beast, even death can't wipe out its crimes. However, just as he finished speaking, the giant dragon in the sky that was already on the verge of collapse swayed twice and suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already behind Luoli. At this time, there were no wounds on its body. On the ground, all the humans who saw this scene exclaimed in surprise. They clearly saw that the giant dragon's chest was pierced and blood was flowing like a waterfall. Why was it unharmed now? Luoli's expression also changed and he cursed. Damn it, what the hell? Ha 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 ha. The giant dragon's unpleasant laughter could be heard. Lowly creature. How dare you try to kill a giant dragon? Are you King joking? As it spoke, it faced Luoli and revealed its 10-meter-long claws that shone with a cold light. Chapter 508. Loria level, 10 Grand Desolate Master. He thought that he was at the peak of the Flaming Origin continent. However, his full-powered attack had clearly pierced through the dragon's body. However, after the dragon's pierced body disappeared and reappeared, it was completely unharmed. This was completely beyond the knowledge of the people of the Flaming Origin continent. It was also beyond Lori's knowledge. At this moment, the dragon faced Lori and bared its sharp fangs. It extended its sharp claws that gleamed with cold light. Lori's attack had used up more than half of his energy. Seeing that the dragon was about to unleash its power, she had no choice but to dodge. She flapped her wings and instantly flew into the distance. Her speed was extremely fast. In almost an instant, she was already dozens of kilometers away. However, the dragon's body flashed and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in front of him. Then the huge tail smashed down on Lori's head. Lori wanted to dodge, but suddenly realized that she couldn't move at all. It was as if she had been imprisoned. In fact, it wasn't that she was imprisoned. It was that the space she was in had been imprisoned. This evil dragon was a space-type dragon. It could control the space within a certain range. When it used spatial imprisonment, it was as if the space was completely locked. Everything in the space couldn't move. Seeing the huge tail that was hundreds of meters long and dozens of meters thick coming down on her, Lori cursed in her heart. F***ck, I'm finished just like that. All the humans on the ground were terrified when they saw this scene. The sect master of the Flaming Origin ancient sect was their life insurance. It was because of Sect Master Luo that the General Corpse didn't dare to come close. If Sect Master Luo died, even if the evil dragon didn't kill them, they would probably die under the General Corpse's claws in the near future. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared behind the dragon without any warning. He was dressed in black and had an ordinary appearance. On his back was a pair of fiery red flame wings that looked very beautiful. In his right hand, a black chain was slowly thrown out. This chain was like a black snake that slithered through the air. In the blink of an eye, it had wrapped around the giant dragon's tail. Of course, the dragon also saw the black chain. However, it didn't take it to heart at all. Its tail was tens of meters thick. In its eyes, this chain was like a child's toy. How could it possibly take it to heart? However, when the chain wrapped around its tail, which was swinging downwards, suddenly stopped. The chain was pulled taut, and its tail was suspended in the air. When the people on the ground saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. A human was like an ant in front of a 1,000-meter-long dragon. However, this human used the chain to stop the dragon's tail from smashing down. This was truly inconceivable. Seizing the opportunity, Luo Li fled far away. He turned to Emosher and said, "Brother, thank you very much. Otherwise, I would have lost my life." When the evil dragon saw that its tail was actually stopped by a mere ant, it was surprised and also a little annoyed. A mere ant dares to be so presumptuous. Amidst its anger, it suddenly turned around. Its giant tail swept horizontally and smashed towards Emosher. Emosher's figure flashed and appeared on the right side. He dodged the sweep of the tail, grabbed the chain at the same time, dragged the giant dragon, and smashed it towards the ground. This huge force was ruthlessly thrown towards the ground. Rumble. The 1,000-meter-long giant dragon was heavily smashed to the ground. A huge pit with a diameter of more than 1,000 meters was smashed into the ground. The ground around the huge pit cracked inch by inch. This scene was extremely visually impactful. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. Luo Li also gave Emosher a thumbs up from afar. "Brother, you're so F***king awesome." The giant dragon was heavily thrown. Although it wasn't injured, it was aggrieved. As the saying went, the damage wasn't great, but the humiliation was extremely strong. In its eyes, humans were completely ants. Perhaps in the entire history of the giant dragons, no giant dragon had ever been smashed to the ground by a mere ant in such a humiliating manner. In its fury, an extremely hoarse voice came from its throat. "Lowly reptile, you're courting death." As it spoke, its figure flashed and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in the sky. However, even if it used the teleportation technique, when it teleported to another location, it found that the inconspicuous black chain was still wrapped around its tail. What the hell was this thing? Naturally, it didn't know that this was the system's reward to Emosher, the dragon-binding rope. And this wasn't its strongest form. If it was in its strongest form, this giant dragon probably wouldn't even be able to move. The dragon-binding rope was condensed from the flesh and blood of infected creatures. Emoshur had also condensed this dragon-binding rope from the flesh and blood of a small number of infected creatures in a moment of desperation. If there were more infected creatures around, the effect of the condensed dragon-binding rope would be much stronger than this one. The giant dragon saw that it couldn't use teleportation to get rid of the dragon-binding rope. It simply stopped trying to get rid of it. Instead, it directly flashed its huge sharp claws and teeth at Emoshur. It wanted to use its body to forcefully crush this lowly reptile. It wanted to let this lowly reptile know how big the gap between humans and giant dragons was. Its sharp claws slashed fiercely at Emoshur. Emoshur teleported and dodged its sharp claws. Then, a large saber appeared in his right hand. This large knife still looked unremarkable. From the shape, it looked like the pig slaughtering knife on Earth. However, compared to the pig slaughtering knife, it was a little bigger. It was more than 2 meters long. There were even a few circles of cloth on the handle of the knife. It looked completely like a street stall. The energy in Emoshur's body crazily poured into this knife. The giant dragon didn't care about this knife at all. A hoarse voice came from its throat. "Reptile, die." As it spoke, its sharp claws had already grabbed at Emoshur. Emoshur sneered. The dragon salyer in his right hand was raised high. "Today, with the long knife in hand, I will slay the dragon." The dragon salyer in his hand suddenly slashed down diagonally. He didn't see any energy from the dragon salyer, nor did he see any blade chi from the dragon salyer. A crack instantly appeared in the center of the giant dragon's body. The upper half of its body slid diagonally to the left. Soon it was separated into 2 halves. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. The 2 halves of the dragon corpse fell from the sky. In the end, it crashed heavily onto the ground. Blood splattered everywhere. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they were all scared out of their wits. Chapter 509. A 1,000-meter-long dragon had been so easily slain by a human. Everyone present was dumbfounded. They all turned their heads and fixed their gazes on Emoshur. Who was this human? How could he be so strong? With a casual wave of his saber, he killed the dragon. One had to know that sect leader Luo was a superhero in their eyes. He was the ceiling of the entire Flaming Land's combat strength. But even sect leader Luo couldn't do anything to this dragon, and he almost died under the tail of this dragon. But now, this man had slaughtered this giant dragon with just a casual slash of his sword. This was truly inconceivable. Emoshur was also slightly stunned. Was slaying a dragon so simple? That was impossible. He was now a level 1 Grand Desolate Master, equivalent to a level 1 Evolved Dragon. He had just looked at the level of this dragon. It was a level 5 Evolved Dragon. Although he was a 4-winged demonic dragon, his combat strength was extremely strong. He could challenge these level 5 Evolved Dragons by 4 or 5 levels. But it was impossible to kill them with a single slash. Was this dragon-slaying saber that strong? Just as he was feeling puzzled, he saw the huge dragon corpse on the ground flash, and then suddenly disappear. When it reappeared, the dragon had already appeared behind Emoshur. It made a squeaking sound from its throat. "Gaga gaga. A mere reptile. Do you really think you can slay a dragon?" Emoshur hurriedly turned around. He saw that the dragon was slightly flapping its wings, and hovering not far behind him. And it seemed that this guy was still unscathed. When all the humans saw this scene, they were shocked again. Is this guy unkillable? It has clearly been cut in half, but it can still appear intact. What kind of technique is this? It's over, we're over, it's really over. At this moment, Emoshur finally understood. This should be some kind of spatial illusion. On the surface, it looked like he had cut this guy, but in reality he hadn't. A spatial dragon was not easy to deal with. At this moment, the dragon's huge tail slapped down at Emoshur. Wherever the huge tail passed, the air seemed to be distorted. With a thought, Emoshur's figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already thousands of kilometers away. The giant dragon was slightly surprised. There's actually someone who can teleport so far in this broken place? In the next moment his mind moved. Emoshur, who had just disappeared, reappeared at his original spot. Emoshur couldn't help but be shocked when he saw this. This guy's spatial ability was truly a little perverse. He had already escaped for over 1,000 kilometers, but he was still caught by it. Ha 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 ha. Do you think I can't do anything to you just because you've escaped thousands of kilometers away? Lowly human, pathetic reptile. Die. As he spoke, his giant tail once again smashed towards Immortal. This time, Immortal wanted to use the dragon shadow step to escape, but he was unable to do so. His space was also sealed. The gigantic dragon's gigantic tail, which was hundreds of meters long and tens of meters thick, was already smashing towards him. In a moment of desperation, Immortal hurriedly sent out a thought. In the next moment, his figure instantly disappeared. The giant dragon's gigantic tail swept past the place where he had just been, and then smashed heavily on the ground. Rumble, a huge ravine which was thousands of meters long, was directly smashed into the ground. It was as if a rift valley had instantly appeared on the ground. Under this smash, the ground shook violently. People couldn't even stand properly. They all squatted down or simply sat on the ground. At the same time, they were a little worried about Immortal in their hearts. Just now it seemed to have hit that person. It seemed that it didn't hit him again. They didn't see it clearly at all. Soon, the giant dragon gave an answer. It looked at the place where Immortal had disappeared. It chuckled. Hiding in space? Interesting. However, there was still a hint of disdain in his words. Playing with space in front of a space-type giant dragon was completely looking for trouble. He waved his right front claw gently, trying to pull Immortal out of that space. However, with this wave he found that the space didn't move at all. This piqued his interest. Looks like it's an interesting little toy. As a space-type giant dragon, he had always had a special liking for space-type treasures. Now that he found a space treasure that even he couldn't control, he was naturally very interested. Since I can't pull you out, I'll have to go in personally. As he said that, he moved his mind. The giant figure instantly disappeared. All the humans present thought that this evil dragon would quickly appear elsewhere after disappearing, just like before. However, out of their expectations, after this evil dragon disappeared, it didn't appear again. After waiting for a full 5 minutes, they still didn't see the evil dragon appear. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. What's going on? Gone? That evil dragon and that human both disappeared. No matter what, as long as they're not here, it's equivalent to temporarily escaping death. These humans were all rejoicing. The flame-beginning ancient sect leader, Luoli, shook her head slightly. The pair of ponytails on her head swayed rhythmically as she shook her head. What a good person, what a pity. At the same time, in Immortal's micro-world, Emma was talking to her son by the lake. Emma liked life here very much. There were no fights, no disturbances. Most importantly, her son was no longer stupid here. Instead, he had become very smart and sensible. Therefore, unless there were any special circumstances, she would always stay here and accompany her son. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared. The mother and son were very familiar with this situation. Big brother Emma now called Immortal Big brother Emma. Her son also greeted Immortal. Uncle Emma is here. Immortal didn't say anything. Instead, he looked up at the sky. The mother and son didn't know what was going on. They also looked up at the sky. With a single glance, both of their expressions changed drastically. They saw a shadow suddenly appear in the sky. Gradually, the shadow became solid. It was actually a black giant dragon that was 1,000 meters long. From the head, it looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. Although the mother and son had seen Immortal transform into a giant dragon before, the giant dragon that Immortal transformed into had no evil intentions towards them. Therefore, they didn't find it very scary. However, when this giant dragon appeared, the mother and son felt a sense of terror from the bottom of their hearts. Big brother Emma, isn't this an illusion created by you? Emma asked. She also knew who Immortal was in this space. As long as Immortal thought about it, he could create this world. With another thought, he could destroy this world. That was why she asked. In the sky, the giant dragon heard and laughed. An illusion created by him? You think too highly of him. Forget it. I'm not going to talk nonsense with you lowly insects. Die. Chapter 510. In the sky, the giant dragon spoke in human language with a hoarse voice. Is he an illusion? You think too highly of him. Lowly reptiles, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Die. As he spoke, he used his mind to seal the space where Immortal, Emma, and the others were. Then, his huge tail once again smashed toward Immortal and the others. On the giant dragon's ferocious face, a ferocious and human-like smile appeared. It seemed to have seen the scene of these humans being smashed into meat paste. However, at this moment, its huge tail that was smashing down suddenly became motionless. It was as if it was caught by an invisible giant hand. But it knew that this was not an invisible giant hand, but the space where its tail was located was locked. He looked at the three humans in front of him in surprise. How was this possible? How could these three mere insects lock down the space he was in? What surprised him the most was that he tried all kinds of methods to break free from this space lock. However, it was no use at all. The space where he was seemed to have formed a huge invisible ice block, and it had become a frozen fly in this piece of ice. Regardless of whether it used its physical strength or spatial skills, it was of no use. No, this is impossible. He roared in his heart. His body kept struggling. However, no matter how hard he tried, his body did not move. At this moment, hiss! His tail was suddenly torn off by a huge force. Blood immediately poured down like heavy rain. Roar! The Sherlong screamed in pain. He could feel that this was still some kind of spatial skill. His body was in this space. And when the space was torn apart, his body would naturally be torn apart as well. This time, panic finally appeared in his heart. What it was most proud of was its spatial skills. With its spatial skills, it could challenge other evolved dragons that were several levels higher. But now all his spatial skills were completely useless here. And he could only watch his body being torn apart by the other party's spatial skills. Obviously, the other party had a spatial skill that was far more advanced than his. It had been crushed in the field it was best at. How could this not make him panic? Rip! Along with the sound of cloth being torn, its wings were torn off. It wanted to open its mouth and spit out flames. However, it found that it couldn't even spit out flames. In the next moment, Ryup, its pair of front claws were torn off from its body by a tremendous force. Aolo 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 aolo. It screeched in terror. However, this was not the end. Rip! A pair of its hind legs were torn off. Fresh blood fell from the sky like a blood-red waterfall. Once again, a pool of blood formed on the ground. However, this time it was unable to recover. Rip! Its head was directly twisted off. Of course, the dragon wasn't dead yet. The vitality of dragons was extremely strong. Even if the head was cut off, the head could still live for several months. But at this time, the huge head let out a miserable shriek. No! As it screamed, its head was split in half. It was as if an invisible knife had sliced it open from the middle. Finally, under Immortal's thought, the 1,000-meter-long dragon's body directly exploded. However, it didn't explode into a cloud of blood mist. Instead, it exploded into a colorful, extremely gorgeous firework with a diameter of 10 kilometers in the sky. At this point, the evil dragon Kongjia was dead. At the same time, the system's voice sounded in Immortal's mind. Killed 11 dragons, level up. Name, Immortal. Level 2 Great Desolate Master. Level 2 Evolved Dragon. Level 10 Long Yen Shi. Ability. Click to expand. He easily leveled up. However, it wasn't easy. It was because this dragon followed him to the miniature world that he was able to kill it. Otherwise, with its spatial skills, he really couldn't do anything to it. It seemed that he had to be careful when he encountered a dragon in the future. Immortal asked in his mind, "How many dragons do I need to kill for the next level up?" The system's voice sounded. Killed 10 dragons. Immortal nodded. It wasn't a lot. Emma and her son still didn't know whether the dragon just now was real or fake. In this world, Immortal was God. There was nothing that Immortal couldn't do. In their opinion, that dragon was probably condensed by Immortal to make them happy. Immortal looked at the gorgeous fireworks in the sky and asked, "Is it beautiful?" Emma and her son nodded. "It's beautiful." Immortal looked at the fireworks that were still exploding and said, "If it's beautiful, Then look at it a little longer. I'm tired, I'm going to rest for a while. After saying that, with a thought his figure disappeared. When he reappeared he was already in the Dragon Valley of the miniature world. Next to the waterfall in the Dragon Valley, there was a peach forest. In the peach forest there was a thatched hut. Emosher's figure instantly appeared in the thatched hut. Lying on the bed in the thatched hut, listening to the sound of the waterfall outside the house, looking at the colorful peach blossoms outside the window, it was really a kind of enjoyment. But at this time, Emosher didn't enjoy it. Instead, in his mind he flipped through the dragon's memory. Generally speaking, after becoming a dragon, more or less, would have a little bit of dragon consciousness. Dragon consciousness was extremely protective of their brain, so it was almost impossible to plunder the memory of a real dragon. But in this miniature world it was different. Emosher could plunder the memory of whoever he wanted. Even if the dragon god came to this world, it would be played in the palm of Emosher's hand. That dragon had a long life and had lived for more than 3,000 years. Its memory was also very complicated. Emosher spent more than 3 hours to finish reading its memory. And after reading its memory, Emosher felt like he had eaten a fly. Because from the dragon's memory, he knew that the Flaming Land was actually just a laboratory in the dragon's world. Or rather, an experimental continent. Flaming Land. Wasn't that an experiment? Everyone on Earth thought that humans were the masters of all things. But in reality, Earth was just a hunting ground of the Flaming Land. Now the people on the Flaming Land thought that the Flaming Land was the most developed place in the entire universe. But in reality, the Flaming Land was just an experimental place in the dragon's world. F***ck. Emosher couldn't help but curse. Was there an end to it? This feeling was like Deadpool discovering that he was just a comic character in a book, and everything around him was just a comic world. Emosher shook his head repeatedly. Chapter 511. Emosher felt like he had eaten a fly as he continued to look through the dragon's memories. The dragon's world was not a planet. Instead, it was a large star field. There were a total of 3,600 planets in this star field. There were dragons living on every planet. This was called the 10,000 Dragon Star Field, or simply the 10,000 Dragon Realm. In the dragon's knowledge, the 10,000 Dragon Realm was the center of the entire universe. And this was not just the dragon's knowledge, it was very likely the truth. Because in the known universe, almost all the star fields revolved around the 10,000 Dragon Realm. Other than that, these dragons did not find any other similar star fields. In the 10,000 Dragon Realm, there were countless dragons. These dragons were not only powerful, but their technology was also a level higher than that of the Flaming Land. In the 10,000 Dragon Realm, there were tens of thousands of laboratories. These laboratories had been around for a long time. For example, the Flaming Land was one of the laboratories. It had been more than 500,000 years since the Flaming Land had intelligent life. In fact, these intelligent life forms were scattered in the Flaming Land by the laboratories. Every creature in the Flaming Land had a specific number. The Flaming Land's name in the 10,000 Dragon Realm was Laboratory 666. The dragon scientists had set up an invisible barrier outside each laboratory. No matter how strong the creatures in the laboratory were or how advanced the technology was, they could not fly out of this barrier. For example, the 666 laboratories barrier was the border of the solar system where the Flaming Land was located. No matter how strong the people of the Flaming Land were or how advanced their technology was, they could never fly out of the solar system. Because at the border of the solar system, there was a barrier with a temperature of 30,000 degrees. As long as they touched this barrier, they would be instantly melted. The pitiful people of the Flaming Land were equivalent to birds in a cage. It was just that until now, they had not realized this fact. Emosher saw this and felt like he had been f***ed by a dog. When he came to the Flaming Land from Earth, he thought he had escaped the cage. He did not expect that the Flaming Land was just an even bigger cage. However, Emosher would not resign himself to fate just like that. The 10,000 Dragon Realm, right? One day, I will kill the 10,000 Dragon Realm. I'll let you dragons who think you're the masters have a taste of being dominated. After spending 3 hours, Immortal finished looking through the giant dragon's macroscopic memories. Next, it was time to deal with some specific matters. Kong Jiu was an investigator sent to the Flaming Land. They were mainly responsible for research. To put it bluntly, they were here to observe the changes in the Flaming Continent over the past tens of thousands of years since the dragons had left. Although Kong Jiu was here to do research, he was actually just a temporary worker hired because there was a shortage of manpower in the laboratory. Kong Jiu's nature was to wreak havoc. Coming here, he naturally had to wreak havoc. Now that Immortal had killed him, there was no guarantee that it wouldn't cause a huge commotion. That would depend on whether those people would pursue the matter. After all, Kong Jiu was only a temporary worker, and had not even signed a contract. There was no guarantee of personal safety. Moreover, it didn't have any family. It was just a hooligan. If the laboratory didn't pursue the matter, this matter would be over. However, if they encountered a serious researcher, they might not let go of this matter. Next, at least 5 dragon investigation teams would come to the Flaming Land to investigate. The strength of these investigation teams was not strong. However, if they died in the Flaming Land, then there would be more dragons coming to the Flaming Land. If this continued, Immortal would have to face thousands of dragons in the future. Immortal smiled bitterly. In the end, he still had to go against the dragons? Since the system had already planned for his future development, and things were indeed developing in the opposite direction of the dragons. So what if he became an enemy of the dragons? Thinking of this, Immortal's blood gradually boiled in his chest. He seemed to have seen the scene of himself facing thousands of dragons. Although there were thousands of dragons, he would go against the whole world. This feeling was really a little King cool. In fact, this was the adventurous nature of the demon dragon in Immortal's body after he evolved into a 4-winged demonic dragon. At the same time, in the outside world, those who were lucky enough to survive were secretly delighted when they didn't see the dragon and the human for a long time. The giant dragon finally left. However, at the same time, they were secretly worried. They didn't know how the human was now. Would he have died under the claws of the dragon? Lori had already landed on the ground. His gaze had been fixed on the spot where Immortal and the giant dragon had disappeared into just now. Although the city was now empty, he had a vague feeling that the human was not dead. As for why he had this feeling, he didn't know. Therefore, he just stared at that place. After more than 10 minutes, the air in that area suddenly distorted. Soon a figure slowly appeared there. This figure looked very ordinary with an ordinary appearance. However, Lori recognized it at a glance. This was that person. Immortal could accelerate time in his own miniature world. Therefore, he looked through Long Jio's memories in the miniature world for 4 hours and even slept. Only 10 minutes had passed on the Flaming Land. Seeing Immortal appear, the people on the ground were all stunned. He's back. Where's the dragon? He looks unscathed. Could it be that he killed that evil dragon? How is that possible? You've seen the strength of that evil dragon. Do you think it's so easy to kill it? At this time, Lori condensed a pair of energy wings on his back and soared into the sky again. He cupped his fists at Immortal. Thank you for saving me from danger just now. May I know your name? Immortal glanced at Lori, then glanced at the humans below. He said indifferently, soon something big will happen. After he finished speaking, his figure flashed, and he had already disappeared. Lori was stunned. Damn, is he not giving me face at all? At this time, the Grand Elder below said, Sect Master, he's Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island. Lori heard this and nodded slightly. Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island? Interesting indeed. Hearing this, the rest of the humans came to a realization. He's Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island. I've heard from others that the strongest person on the Flaming Land is Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island. Today, I finally see him in person. I heard that he's the strongest person on the continent. However, as for how strong he is, no one knows. If that's the case, then perhaps he really did slay that evil dragon. Chapter 512. Immortal did not care about those humans' admiration, gratitude, envy, and even gratitude to the ancient flame sect leader. He did not kill the giant dragon to save these people. He only did it to complete the mission given by the system and improve his strength. Moreover, he had understood a principle a long time ago. Not all efforts would be rewarded, and not all good intentions would be rewarded. Many times you put in a lot of effort but come up empty-handed. Many times, if you are kind to others and they are grateful to you, they may turn around and stab you in the back. Even if they do not stab you in the back, they will not be grateful. Therefore, Immortal was indifferent to many things. After returning to the first hunting island, he was thinking about how to improve his strength. This time, the battle with the space dragon allowed him to understand the power of the space element. If he did not use any skills and just fought head-on, he could have easily killed that giant dragon. However, after the giant dragon used its space element skill, even he could only escape. If he did not escape into the miniature world, he might not have been able to kill that giant dragon. Therefore, it was imperative to improve his strength. However, it was difficult to improve his strength by killing those infected creatures. Therefore, Immortal was considering whether he should take the initiative to attack instead of waiting for those giant dragons to come. Go directly to the Myriad Dragon Realm? Kill those giant dragons in the Myriad Dragon Realm, and improve his strength. Of course, this would require him to take a huge risk. It was best not to go before he had a good plan. At the same time, in the Myriad Dragon Realm, on one of the planets, in a research institute, a human was sitting leisurely in an office. To be exact, he was not a human. He was a giant dragon. Although the giant dragons looked down on humans, they had to admit that the human body was much more convenient than their dragon body in daily life. The smallest dragon body was 100 meters long. Many of them were thousands of meters long. With such a huge body, it had a huge advantage in battle. In the entire universe, there were no races that could be a match for the Dragon Clan. However, in daily life, it brought them a lot of inconvenience. For example, their huge bodies were a hindrance when it came to delicate work like scientific research. On the contrary, the seemingly small and weak bodies of humans were very handy in this kind of work. Thus, the dragons used an advanced genetic medicine to temporarily transform their bodies into human bodies. This drug allowed them to freely switch between their human and dragon forms. This dragon was called Shui Yang. The giant dragons of the Myriad Dragon Realm all had their own attributes. Generally, dragons used their attributes as their surnames. For example, Kong Jiu was a space-type giant dragon, so his surname was Kong. Shui Yang was a giant dragon of the water attribute, so his surname was Water. Shui Yang and Kong Jiu were playmates who played together when they were young. After growing up, Shui Yang became a researcher while Kong Jiu had nothing to do and became a slacker. In recent years, Kong Jiu came to Shui Yang and asked him to find a good job for him. Shui Yang had no choice but to arrange for Kong Jiu to be the investigator. The job was very simple. It was to go to those experimental planets to investigate, and then report the actual situation of those planets. There was nothing technical about it. But Kong Jiu, this guy would feel uncomfortable all over if he did not stir up trouble for a day. Over the past month, he had stirred up quite a bit of trouble. Shui Yang had to clean up after him every time. This time, he went to experimental planet number 666, and this guy went around slaughtering the creatures of that planet. If this was discovered by the supervisor, he would be fired. Shui Yang originally planned to personally make a trip to experimental planet number 666 and bring that guy back if it really did not work out. But he did not expect that guy to suddenly lose contact. He had not been able to contact him for several days. Even when he used the long-range life detector to detect, he did not discover the existence of that guy. It was as if he suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. This was an unexpected surprise. If that guy could really disappear from the face of the earth, then he would thank the heavens and earth. But Shui Yang was also somewhat surprised at the same time. Logically speaking, with the strength of a giant dragon's body, on experimental planet number 666, there was no creature that could hurt him. How could he suddenly disappear without a trace? Could it be that on that planet, a more powerful creature had already evolved? Although this idea was somewhat absurd, he still kept it in mind. Looks like he had to find an opportunity to personally make a trip to experimental planet number 666. After Wang Yi dealt with Kong Jiu, from Kong Jiu's memories, he knew that under the Sea Heart waterfall, there was actually a spatial portal. It was a two-way portal from the Flaming Land to the Myriad Dragon realm. At first, Immortal wondered if he could close this portal. But after thinking about it, he decided not to. Now more than half of the Flaming Land had been infected by the general corpses. No matter how strong he was, he could not be faster than the general corpses. Even if he closed this portal, the Flaming Land would eventually reach the end of the world. And even if he closed this portal, with the means of the Myriad Dragon realm, they could easily open it again. Therefore he did not bother to do this. As for what to do if the giant dragons of the Myriad Dragon realm came, Immortal had already thought of a countermeasure. At worst, he would move the entire dragon palace into the miniature world. The size of the miniature world now could completely accommodate the entire dragon palace. In the following days, Immortal basically killed those general corpses every day. Although the kill points obtained from killing these general corpses were very little compared to the 10 trillion that Wang Yi needed to level up. Even if he killed everyone in the Flaming Land, he would not be able to obtain 10 trillion kill points. But Wang Yi did not kill these general corpses just for the kill points. His true goal was to obtain evolution points. The more evolution points he had, the more demon-suppressing orbs he could sign in for. On this day, Immortal came to a city. In the past, this was a densely populated city. But now there was not a single person in the city. Looking down at this city from the sky, he saw that this place was no longer as prosperous as it used to be. It was late autumn. This place was desolate. The fallen leaves on the streets kept rolling forward in the autumn wind. Collapsed walls, dilapidated buildings, and crooked doors all told that this city had once experienced a great battle. That was more than a month ago. This city was broken through by the general corpses. Almost all the humans were transformed into general corpses. There were only a few hundred survivors left, and they had already fled with their hoverboards. Logically speaking, if there were no humans within a radius of dozens of kilometers, the general corpses would lose their target and stay here, waiting for the next target to appear. But for some reason, the general corpses in this city had disappeared. The entire city seemed to be a ghost city. Chapter 513. When Immortal flew over the city, he felt a little strange. This city seemed to be different from the other cities that had been conquered by the general corpse. It was too quiet, so quiet that it felt a little strange. He used the demon dragon's eye to look at the city. He didn't find any problems. It was just that he felt that there was something wrong with this city. Originally, with his cautious personality, he wouldn't rashly go down at this time. However, the risk factor in the demon dragon genes made him want to go down and explore. After a while he made up his mind. Then he would go down and take a look. After all, he was now the peak of the Flaming Land's combat power. And he was far stronger than the Flaming Land's combat power. On the Flaming Land, there weren't any creatures or weapons that could really hurt him. Thinking of this, he retracted his wings. He slowly floated down to the ground. Stepping on this street full of leaves, he felt that something was wrong with this city. As for what was wrong, he couldn't tell. In short, it was just a feeling. Immortal's dragon sense enveloped the entire city as he slowly walked forward. Currently, his level 10 dragon will could reach up to 10 kilometers underground. But even so, when he walked in this city, he didn't find anything. He slowly walked from the center of the city to the east. After walking for half an hour, he didn't find anything. He sped up and continued to explore the entire city. However, after spending a full hour, he still didn't find anything. In the end, Immortal shook his head. A pair of wings appeared on his back. He instantly catapulted to 1,000 meters in the air. He looked down at the wilderness around the city. Although it was late autumn, there were still many living creatures moving around in the wilderness. Although many of the plants were close to yellow, there was still some green. Especially some evergreen plants. They were still dark green at this time. On the other hand, the city was dark and gloomy. It was like the gray color that the screen turned after the protagonist died in a game. Emosure took one last look at this place and shook his head. He flapped his wings and flew into the distance. Not long after Emosure left, more than 50 kilometers underground in this city, a blood-red eye suddenly opened. In the next few days, Emosure continued to kill these general corpses. Without using the demon suppressing orb, Emosure had used the dragon slaughtering saber to kill the general corpse. Basically, no matter how strong the general corpse was, the dragon slaughtering saber only needed one slash to finish it off. As he used the dragon salure more and more, he became more and more familiar with it. Furthermore, he discovered that the dragon salure seemed to be consciously accepting the energy in his body at times. For example, when he poured his energy into the dragon salure could only passively accept it at the beginning. But later on, it seemed to be absorbing his energy on its own. Even if he didn't inject it, it would still continue to absorb the energy in Emosure's body. Sometimes, Emosure was afraid that he would lose control and let the saber absorb too much energy. Fortunately, he was still able to control himself. With just a thought, he could cut off the transmission of energy. Of course, this saber absorbed a lot of energy, but it was also more spiritual than other sabers. Emosure had always felt that as soon as he raised the knife, it would know where to cut. This made Emosure suspect that the saber had its own consciousness. However, Emosure asked the system a few times, and the system's answer was negative. No. This made Emosure very puzzled. However, since he didn't understand things, Emosure temporarily put it to the back of his mind. On this day, Emosure came to another city. This city had already been breached. However, unlike before, there were countless general corpses in this city. Moreover, these general corpses were not of low levels. Emosure glanced over. Basically, more than half of these general corpses were evolved general corpses, which was equivalent to desolate hunters. One had to know that almost all the desolate hunters on the Flaming Dawn continent had fled. Almost all of the remaining were desolate hunters. After desolate hunters transformed into general corpses, although their strength would be greatly increased, it was impossible for them to directly break through from desolate hunters to desolate hunters. In other words, these general corpses had used some kind of method to become evolved general corpses after transformation. No one knew what method they used. However, Emosure didn't care about this. He only cared about killing. These general corpses, whether male or female, old or young, when they saw Emosure, a human, appear, they all roared and pounced towards Emosure. Emosure took out the dragon salure and poured the energy in his body into the dragon salure. When the general corpses approached, he waved his right hand lightly. He didn't see any energy spreading out. All the general corpses around him instantly disappeared. One slash, instantly killing thousands of evolved general corpses. However, this was just child's play. After he killed these thousands of evolved general corpses, tens of thousands of general corpses began to surge out from the surrounding buildings like a tide. All of them surged towards Emosure. They were like a torrent, wanting to drown Emosure. Like a giant beast, they wanted to devour Emosure. Emosure estimated that there were about 100,000 general corpses in the entire city. And at this moment, these hundreds of thousands of general corpses were all rushing towards Emosure. If one were to look down from the sky, it would make one's scalp go numb. However, Emosure remained motionless in the face of so many general corpses. The tip of the dragon salure in his right hand was pressed against the ground. Energy flowed along his right arm and continuously poured into the dragon salure. At this moment, he actually had a feeling. The dragon salure was very excited. It seemed to be a little excited. It was eager to give it a try. When the general corpses were only 100 meters away from him, and would be able to pounce on him with just one more jump, Emosure finally moved. The dragon salure in his right hand gently swung out in a circle. At this moment, all the general corpses that were pouncing towards him disappeared. It was as if everything that had happened just now was just a nightmare. When the dream was over, everything disappeared. These hundreds of thousands of general corpses, and half of them had reached the level of hunters evolved general corpses. Under Emosure's slash, they all disappeared in an instant. If this scene was seen by others, they would probably be shocked to the point of being a god. Even the sect master of the flame-beginning ancient sect, that level 10 Great Desolate Master, was far from being able to do this. Emosure instantly killed hundreds of thousands of general corpses with a single slash. However, he did not relax. Instead, he once again poured the energy in his body into the dragon Salyer. Because he could feel that there was still a big boss hidden in the city. Sure enough, a moment later, a figure slowly appeared from the ruins in the distance. Chapter 5:14. The figure had the outline of a human. However, it was 300 meters tall. There were circles of fat on its body, making it look like a spokesperson for Michelin tires. Just the stubble on the side of his huge mouth was as thick as a tree. It was completely naked as it stared at Emosure in the distance. It let out a roar from its throat. A mere human dares to hurt the descendant of Jiangchen? You're courting death. Its voice was extremely hoarse, as if it was sawing wood. Emosure sized up the general corpse from top to bottom. The blood demons, I had already seen its level. Species, general corpse, level 3 super evolved. A level 3 super evolved general corpse was equivalent to a level 3 grand desolate master. The evolution of these general corpses was too fast. It had only been slightly more than 3 months since the first corpse had been retrieved. In such a short time, a super evolved general corpse equivalent to a grand desolate master had appeared. Emosure couldn't help but frown slightly. If the evolution speed was like this, would there be an existence stronger than a level 10 Grand Desolate Master? However, he was soon relieved. The 10,000 Dragon Realm had strict restrictions on the combat strength of these laboratory creatures. No matter how strong the creatures on these experimental planets were, their final combat strength couldn't exceed the limit. On the flaming beginning continent, the highest level of the creatures on experimental planet 666 was equivalent to a level 10 Grand Desolate Master. Therefore, Emosure could be at ease as the ceiling of his combat strength. With a thought, Emosure first plundered the general corpse's memories. However, after looking at these memories, Emosure shook his head. This general corpse's memories were very chaotic. Its memories were made up of countless fragmented memory fragments. Moreover, many of these memories didn't seem to be its own memories. It should have received the memories of some other creatures. There was no way to find the pattern of these memories, nor could he piece them together. Emosure didn't bother about these things anymore. Looking at the giant Michelin spokesperson that was more than 300 meters tall, he said mockingly, "Descendant of Jiangchen? You think too highly of yourself. At most, you're Jiangchen's fart." The general corpse roared. "How dare you? How dare you insult forefather Jiangchen? You're courting death." As he spoke, he strode towards Emosure. Rumble, rumble. With every step it took, its huge feet left a fat footprint that was more than 50 meters long on the ground. With every step it took, the fat on its body jiggled like jelly. The old bird between its legs was also constantly swaying. Emosure felt a chill run down his spine. This guy's appearance was too disgusting. It arrived in front of Emosure and stomped down on Emosure with its gigantic foot. Emosure leaped back lightly, causing the giant palm to miss. Rumble. The giant foot missed and stepped on the ground, causing the ground to shake a few times. The next step was certain. Crack, crack, crack. The giant foot began to split into 5-meter-thick python-like tentacles, which shot toward Emosure to entangle him. Emosure's figure flashed again, retreating more than 100 meters. Although the giant pythons couldn't reach Emosure, they all opened their mouths. Their mouths were like pea shooters, shooting out hundreds of blood-red beans. All the blood beans were the size of a human head. They shot towards Emosure like bullets. When they were 5 meters in front of Emosure, they all opened up. Only then did Emosure realize that these blood beans were actually blood spiders. Each of them had 8 legs, and their small heads had blood-red fangs that were shaped like a figurehead. They looked very ferocious. These spiders all flew towards Emosure. This reminded Emosure of the face huggers in Alien. They also flew to people's faces, burrowed into people's mouths, and laid eggs in people's stomachs. However, unlike those tragic characters in Alien, Emosure was very strong. With a thought, He easily suspended these blood spiders in the air with his dragon will. But at this moment, the abdomens of these blood spiders shot out dark green beads. They shot towards Immortal. Immortal leaned to the side. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Several blood-red spider webs were nailed into the tree behind him, which was so thick that it would take 2 people to wrap their arms around it. The remaining leaves on the big tree quickly turned yellow. The trunk of the big tree quickly turned gray where it was shot, and grayish-white pus flowed out. In a moment, the entire tree turned gray, and a large amount of pus seeped out. What a good housework! Were these spider silks so poisonous? Immortal also saw it. He raised his head and looked at the giant Michelin spokesperson. This guy's attack was really impossible to guard against. At first, it was just a stomp, which made people wonder why this guy's attack was so low. He didn't expect that this was just the beginning. Next, it split into tentacles, spit out spiders, and spit out spider silks. Immortal didn't expect this. At this moment, the blood spiders and tentacles melted into gray liquid and wriggled towards its feet. Soon they merged into its feet. Immortal was secretly amazed. What kind of monster did this zombie virus create? The giant general corpse was also a little surprised. You lowly human are very agile. Try this again. As it spoke, its huge right hand clenched into a huge fist the size of 2 or 3 stories and suddenly punched towards Immortal. To be precise, its fist didn't swing out like a human's. Instead, it was as if there was a spring in its arm that shot out directly, so it was extremely fast. Fortunately, Immortal's speed wasn't slow either. He gently jumped to the right and dodged this punch. But suddenly, the left fist came at him again. Immortal jumped again and dodged. At this moment, the guy's fists were like the wind, bouncing towards Immortal. Immortal dodged again, and flashed back 10 meters. But at this moment, he suddenly felt that something was wrong under his feet. Looking down, he saw the grayish-white liquid seeping out of the big tree. Just as he noticed the grayish-white liquid, the ground under his feet suddenly changed again. The grayish-white liquid actually wriggled quickly, and quickly wrapped around Immortal's legs, and kept drilling under Immortal's skin. Good job. This was the liquid that seeped out of the poisonous silk spat out by the blood spider's mouth after poisoning the big tree. He didn't expect that even this liquid could move. F*ck, this was a little ridiculous. Immortal could only move his mind and instantly disappear. When he reappeared, he was already 1,000 meters away from the general corpse. The general corpse looked at Immortal mockingly. You human are quite interesting. You can actually dodge my consecutive attacks, then try this. Before it finished speaking, it suddenly felt a chill in its body. Then its upper body diagonally slid to the left. Its body was actually broken into 2. There was still steam coming out of the broken part. Chapter 5:15. That giant general corpse's previous attack was already very strong. But in fact, that was not the manifestation of its true strength. Previously, this was just an appetizer. Its true combat strength was much more terrifying than what it had displayed earlier. However, Immortal did not give it a chance to display its true strength. The dragon-slaying saber waved gently. The upper body of the giant general corpse slid down to the left. The giant general corpse felt that it did not move, its legs did not bend, and its waist did not bend. How did it get lower and lower? Looking at the other half of its body, it was shocked. He even said, "That's right. What a fast saber." However, he was only surprised. There was no fear at all. This was because the self-healing ability of a general corpse was already very abnormal. And after becoming a super-evolved general corpse, its self-healing ability was even more abnormal. To put it bluntly, even if you took its head off and used it as a ball, you could play a 90-minute match. Including the injury stoppage time, it would be a total of 95 minutes. After kicking it, you could put its head back. It could also come back to life at any time. Therefore, when Immortal cut its body into 2, it did not panic at all. This was much better than having its head kicked like a ball. The fat on its face even squeezed out a smile. Looking at Immortal, it made a rustling sound like sawing wood. Lowly human, do you really think you can kill me? Emosher ignored him and put away the dragon-slaying saber. A pair of wings condensed on his back, and with a leap, he was high into the sky. With a slight flap of his wings, he quickly flew to the next city. The general corpse was stunned and could not help but fly into a rage. "Brat, who are you looking down on? Come back here, do you really think this is the end? Even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will still hunt you down, chop you into pieces, and feed you to the corpse dog." However, when he said the last sentence, his aura suddenly lowered. The last word dog could only be seen moving his lips, because it had discovered a terrifying fact. Its body, which should have healed on its own, was not healing on its own. Instead, it was quickly turning into mucus. No, how was this possible? How could it not heal on its own? Extreme fear and panic began to appear in its eyes. The reason why general corpses were so powerful was because they could not be killed. Therefore, even in the face of humans who were 10 times or even 100 times stronger than them, they still dared to fight head-on. But now, with a single slash from this guy, it actually lost its ability to heal itself. How could it not be afraid? Under such fear, his body turned into a pool of blood. Before it lost its last bit of consciousness, it still couldn't figure it out. How did this human do it? When the zombie general lost consciousness, Emosher, who was flying in the sky, suddenly heard the system's voice in his mind. Killed 1 super-evolved general corpse. Obtained 100 million kill points. Total kill points, 100, 233408. Emosher paused. Previously, when he killed ordinary general corpses, he only gained 0.1 kill points. Only by killing an evolved general corpse could he gain 1 kill point. Killing another super-evolved general corpse would give him 100 million kill points? Oi oi oi. System, your slaughter point system is a little exaggerated. The system's voice quickly came. Every super-evolved general corpse has gone through countless trials of life and death, and stood out from millions, or even tens of millions of general corpses. Their combat power, memory, physical strength, and other aspects far surpass evolved general corpses. So it's not exaggerated at all. Emosher chuckled. This isn't F*King exaggerated? That's 100 million times. Do you have any shame? The system immediately fell silent. When the system fell silent, Emosher felt helpless. But so be it if it collapsed. After all, according to the system's calculation, as long as he killed 9999 super-evolved general corpses, he would be able to level up again. But where would he find 9999 super-evolved general corpses? The system had just said that every super-evolved general corpse stood out from millions of general corpses. It was too difficult to find a super-evolved general corpse. System, where are the super-evolved general corpses? Can you give me a hint? Emosher asked. The system was speechless. Still, there was silence. Emosher felt helpless again. However, according to Emosher's thoughts, the higher the number of general corpses, the more likely it was for super-evolved general corpses to appear. Therefore, he had been going to the big cities for the past few days. In the base on the ground, the humans were surprised when they saw a human flying past them. In the current apocalyptic world, it was no longer suitable for survival outside the base. Other than the heroes with special abilities, the rest of the people, including the Grand Desolate Masters, could only stay in the base obediently. Now this human was flying around in the sky all day long. Was he tired of living? While Emosher was killing the general corpses were constantly attacking the bases. When the bases were first built, there were more than 1,500 of them. Now 3 months had passed, and more than 200 bases had been attacked. As the general corpses evolved faster, their abilities grew stronger as well. The bases were being attacked faster and faster. This once again caused a large-scale panic among the surviving humans. Everyone was pessimistic. It seemed like the humans could not fight against the super-evolved general corpses. The safe zone around the ancient flame sect was shrinking again and again. In the beginning, the safe zone was within 300 kilometers of the tumor. However, slowly, the safe zone was reduced to 150 kilometers. 100 kilometers. Now the humans could only move within 80 kilometers of the ancient flame sect. General corpses began to appear outside of 80 kilometers. The ancient flame sect's sect leader, Lori, killed the general corpses easily in the beginning. Gradually, it became more and more difficult for him to kill the general corpses. Among the humans, there was a saying that the last great cleansing of the apocalypse was coming. The humans had no hope anymore. This was the punishment from the heavens. The humans had been researching all kinds of viruses and thought that they could play with these viruses in the palm of their hands. Now the humans were suffering the consequences of their own actions, and were being played by the viruses. In such an environment, the number of super-evolved general corpses Immortal encountered slowly increased. In the first few days he encountered one. Later on, he encountered one almost every day. Now he would encounter super-evolved general corpses in almost every city, regardless of whether it was a big city or a small town. His kill points were also constantly increasing. Gradually his kill points were nearing 500. However, Immortal felt that this was not fast enough. One must know that the 10,000 Dragon Realm would send people to Earth to investigate Kong Jiu's death. If he could not increase his abilities too much before that, his future would be very difficult. Chapter 5:16. Every time he killed a super-evolved general corpse, he would only get 1 million evolution points. However, he would get as many as 100 million kill points. It was obvious that the kill point system was broken, but the system refused to admit it. However, it was fine as long as it was beneficial to Immortal. He had already killed more than 500 super-evolved general corpses. However, super-evolved general corpses were not easy to find. Basically, each city only had one super-evolved general corpse. Immortal killed more than 20 cities' general corpses every day, and only got 2 billion kill points. It seemed that he was still far from reaching 1 trillion kill points. However, Immortal had no other choice. If he stayed on the flaming continent, he could only slowly increase his strength by killing super-evolved general corpses. As for going to the 10,000 Dragon Realm, Immortal had not considered it yet. After all, it was too dangerous to go to the 10,000 Dragon Realm alone. Before his strength reached a certain level, Immortal would not go there casually. On this day, Immortal came to another city. This was a super large city. Before the apocalypse, it should have been one of the top 3 cities on the flaming continent. In this super large city, the population alone had reached more than 10 million. In other words, there should be more than 10 million general corpses gathered here. Immortal used his dragon's will to scan the city. He could not help but be shocked. The general corpses in this city were all evolved general corpses. There was not even a normal general corpse. Evolved general corpses were more than 10 times more agile than normal general corpses. In terms of combat strength, they were also more than 10 times stronger than normal general corpses. There were more than 10 million general corpses in this city, which was equivalent to more than 10 million desolate hunters. What kind of terrifying force was this? Any force before the apocalypse, whether it was the ancient flaming sect or the dragon race, was nothing in front of this city's general corpses. If this force worked together, they could sweep through the entire flaming continent. If the humans who were already in despair knew of the existence of such a force, who knew how much despair they would feel? When Immortal saw this, he smiled faintly and continued to walk forward. After all, with his current strength, this force was nothing but a fart in front of him. However, these evolved general corpses weren't the strongest forces in the city. In this city, other than these evolved general corpses, there were over 1,000 super-evolved general corpses. This surprised Immortal. In the past, most of the cities only had one general corpse. At most, there were 2 of them. There were thousands of general corpses in this city. He really didn't expect this. However, having more super-evolved general corpses was a good thing. In the eyes of others, there were more than 1,000 super-evolved general corpses. In his eyes, this was more than 100 billion kill points. As for the evolved general corpses, he had no intention of killing them. Since these general corpses could evolve so quickly, they might be able to evolve into super-evolved general corpses soon. At that time, it would be another large amount of killing points. At this moment, The general corpses below also discovered Emosher's presence. They raised their heads and roared, making threatening noises towards Emosher in the sky. Roar! Roar, roar, roar. Emosher paid no attention to this. He slowly descended. When the general corpses saw Emosher descend, they immediately became excited. They all gathered on the ground beneath Emosher. Very soon, the intersection was densely packed with evolved general corpses. If one looked down from the sky, they would discover that the wide intersection was completely occupied by black and gray. Emosher was more than 500 meters in the air, and took out the dragon Salyer. Energy poured into the dragon Salyer from his arm. She lightly drew a cross at the intersection below her. In the next moment, the intersection suddenly collapsed. Boom! Boom! With 2 consecutive sounds, everything at the intersection turned into nothingness in an instant. Only 2 huge, long ravines were left. These 2 ravines were like huge cross-shaped scars on the ground. It was a ghastly sight. With these 2 slashes, Emosher had instantly killed more than 10,000 evolved general corpses, which was equivalent to instantly killing more than 10,000 hunters. What kind of terrifying strength was that? Perhaps this was the power of the dragon Salyer. However, no matter how strong the dragon Salyer was, it still needed to absorb energy. If it wasn't for Emosher's strength, before it could even be used, its energy would have been sucked dry by the blade. At this moment, Emosher continued to slowly descend from the sky. As for the general corpses outside the intersection that could not squeeze in before, although there was a huge space now, they did not dare to squeeze in at all. Their intelligence was even higher than that of normal humans. Seeing the terrifying strength of the human in the sky, they naturally could not continue to rush over to their deaths. On the contrary, when Emosher landed, more than 20 giant general corpses that were more than 500 meters tall surrounded Emosher from all directions. Human, you've pissed us off. One of the corpse generals let out a sound that sounded like a tree branch being broken. Emosher sneered and looked around at the general corpses. Some were like Michelin spokesmen. Some were as thin as 4 chopsticks picking up a piece of tofu. There were also those that were neither fat nor thin, but were covered in muscles. Of course, there were also female general corpses. These giant general corpses that were more than 300 meters tall were all naked. Emosher felt nauseous when he saw this. Each of these super-evolved general corpses had strength comparable to a grand desolate master. They looked at the tiny human that was surrounded by them with anger and disdain in their eyes. Emosher swept his gaze around and slowly shook his head. So what if I've pissed you off? The female general corpse sneered. If you piss us off, there's only one outcome, death. Emosher shook his head. That depends on whether you have the ability. When the female general corpse heard this, she raised her right foot high. I'll trample you to death, you ant. As she spoke, she stomped down on Emosher. Emosher shook his head again. These general corpses really did not grow up. They still played this game. The first time Emosher saw a general corpse play this game, it took him dozens of seconds to kill the general corpse. He wanted to see what tricks the general corpses had. Now that he knew the tricks of these general corpses, he naturally did not waste time. Just now he seemed to be dragging the dragon Salyer in his hand, but in fact, he had been pouring energy into the dragon Salyer. At this moment, he watched as the general corpse's foot stepped down. He only waved the dragon Salyer gently in his right hand. It was as if nothing had happened. However, in the next moment, the upper and lower bodies of the 20 general corpses around him were all separated. All the super-evolved general corpses widened their eyes. They looked at their rapidly separated bodies in disbelief. Chapter 5:17. All the super-evolved general corpses were somewhat surprised. This was only the beginning, and it was already over. They hadn't even used their ultimate move. Not to mention their ultimate move, they hadn't even finished probing, and it was already over. How could this human be so strong? One had to know that in their understanding, humans were a group of insignificant creatures. Even the great desolate masters among humans seemed to have similar combat strength as them on the surface. But in reality, in front of their almost unkillable attribute, no matter how strong a human was, they would eventually be exhausted to death. But this human had cut them all into two with just one slash. Most importantly, their self-healing ability was completely useless in front of this human. In the past, even if their heads were twisted off, they wouldn't feel the aura of death at all. But today, after their bodies were cut in half, they could clearly feel that death was getting closer and closer to them. The footsteps of the Grim Reaper became louder and louder. In the end, all 20 super-evolved general corpses died. Their bodies had completely lost their vitality. And those super-evolved general corpses who were watching the show not far away all had a drastic change in expression. Other than that, there were no other living humans in this city. They all felt a little bored. It wasn't easy for a living human to appear. And they were like a group of cats encountering a mouse. They all wanted to play with this mouse. But they never thought that this mouse would be so strong. He killed 20 cats in one move. This wasn't F*King fun anymore. Thus, the corpse generals stealthily pulled their bodies back behind the buildings and hid. Of course, there were also some general corpses who didn't believe it. They still hadn't used their ultimate moves. And they still had an ultimate move that they hadn't used. How could they escape so easily? Therefore, these super-evolved general corpses were all holding back their ultimate moves. Whoever this human found, their ultimate move would be arranged for him. Immortal had plundered the memories of a few super-evolved general corpses, although he couldn't see the past from their memories. However, Immortal was still able to see the short-term memories. From the memories of these super-evolved general corpses, Immortal knew that they were holding back their ultimate move. He could easily resolve the ultimate move of a super-evolved general corpse with the Dragon Salyer. However, there were over 1,000 super-evolved general corpses. Even if the Dragon Salyer sucked all the energy in his body dry, it was still far from being able to exterminate all the thousands of corpses. Immortal wouldn't be able to kill all of them in one strike unless they obediently sat in a row and ate fruits. Therefore, Immortal put away the dragon slaughtering saber. After setting up a virtual sentry tower outside, he entered the dragon cave to cultivate Long Wei. Ever since he was able to control everything in the miniature world at will, he had already placed the dragon cave inside. Lying in the dragon cave, Immortal completely relaxed his mind and began to rest. Meanwhile, in the outside world, the super-evolved corpse generals had already prepared their ultimate moves. They were just waiting for Immortal to find them, so that they could be released. However, after a full 10 minutes, there was no movement at all. Surprised, they all poked their heads out and looked at where the human was just now. But when they looked, they were surprised to find that the man was not in his original position. This caused them to panic a little. If that guy were to fight them head-on, they could use the ultimate move that they had long prepared to destroy that guy. However, if that guy were to launch a sneak attack from behind, it would be difficult for them to guard against it. While they were surprised, they all walked out from behind the buildings and looked around for Immortal. However, Immortal had hidden in his own miniature space. With their strength, it was impossible for them to discover him. Therefore, these guys held back their ultimate moves for more than half an hour. After more than half an hour, they were sure that the guy had left. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. Immortal was also tired. He slept for 12 hours. 12 hours later, he opened his eyes. With a thought from the dragon, he connected to the virtual sentry tower outside. After detecting those general corpses, they had already let down their guard. He checked the position of each of the commander corpses several times. In his mind, he roughly thought of a few routes. He wanted to kill a few more super-evolved general corpses with every slash. Then, he took out the Dragon Salyer and poured 1/5 of the energy in his body into the Dragon Salyer. With his current strength, he could swing the sword 5 times in a row. After 5 times, the energy in his body would be exhausted. After pouring in, Immortal's mind moved, and he disappeared from the dragon cave. When he reappeared, he was already behind a building. On the other side of the building, a general corpse was sitting on the ground, concentrating on picking the soil between its nails. The moment Immortal appeared, the dragon salyer in his hand slashed at the general corpse across the entire building. Rumble! The building in front of him was suddenly cut open, creating a huge crack that was more than 50 meters wide. At the same time, on the other side of the building, the general corpse that was picking its feet was instantly cut in half. Even until its death, it did not know how it died. At the same time, a huge gully was cut open on the ground. This huge gully was more than 50 meters wide and 5 kilometers long. And within this 5 kilometers, there were 5 huge general corpses. Whoosh 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 whoosh. These 5 huge general corpses were also cut in half. This unforeseen event happened so suddenly that all the general corpses heard the commotion and looked over. They only saw the 5 huge general corpses fall to the ground one after another. Blood flowed like a stream and quickly gathered into a pool of blood on the ground. All the super-evolved general corpses reacted. "Oh no, that despicable human is still here." As they spoke, all the general corpses looked around. However, they could not see Immortal at all. At this moment, Immortal had already teleported to a dilapidated building. He hid in the dark and poured energy into the dragon Salyer. At the same time, when the general corpses realized that Immortal had appeared again, they began to accumulate energy and prepare for their big moves. The general corpses' big moves were extremely powerful. They could destroy an entire city in one move. However, the disadvantage was that it took too long to accumulate energy. Immortal took advantage of the fact that they had not fully accumulated energy and slashed out 3 more times. He killed 7 general corpses. Then he hid in the miniature world again. Those general corpses had already accumulated energy and were waiting for Immortal to appear. However, Immortal seemed to have evaporated into thin air and disappeared again. No matter how they turned the city upside down, they could not find that human. This made these super-evolved general corpses angry and panicked. Chapter 5:18. The super-evolved general corpses were terrified and furious when they could not find Immortal. 2 hours later, they finally let their guard down completely. However, Immortal appeared again at that moment. He swung his sword a few more times. This time he chose a better spot. There were basically super-evolved general corpses around him. He killed over 30 super-evolved general corpses in one round. After 3 slashes, up to 100 super-evolved general corpses were killed. The super-evolved general corpses were shocked, panicked, and furious. To them, humans were an extremely weak race. They had always been the ones toying with humans. When had they ever been toyed with by a mere human? Among the super-evolved general corpses, there was a general corpse that was only over 200 meters tall. He looked smaller and thinner than the other general corpses, but he was actually the leader of these super-evolved general corpses. He had noticed that the humans seemed to be hunting them, the super-evolved general corpses. He immediately called one of the super-evolved general corpses next to him and roared at him a few times. The super-evolved general roared a few times in response. It then turned around and walked deep into the city. At the moment, Immortal was lying on a soft bed floating above the lake in Micro-World. He was enjoying the sun. Naturally, he had already detected that the super-evolved general was walking deep into the city through the virtual guard tower. He immediately followed the super-evolved general corpses with dragon telekinesis. A moment later, the super-evolved general corpses entered a crater with a diameter of over 500 meters deep in the city. Craters like this were very common in various cities. These were basically craters created by all sorts of corpse-destroying bombs that exploded underground when general corpses attacked the city. General corpses were creatures that could burrow under the surface. The corpse-destroying bombs could burrow underground for hundreds, or even thousands of meters, causing devastating damage to the general corpses' nests. Therefore, Immortal had not carefully investigated these craters before. As the general corpses entered the crater, Immortal's dragon telekinesis followed. He saw that the crater was very deep and led underground. When he looked down carefully, he was shocked to find that the crater's depth was so deep. His dragon telekinesis had been following the super-evolved general corpses until they were 10 kilometers underground. At the moment, his dragon telekinesis could not reach down. What's so strange about this huge pit? Immortal muttered to himself. However, no matter how strange it was, he had to do it first. With that thought in mind, Emosher left Miniature World and returned to the city to hunt down the super-evolved general corpses. When the super-evolved zombies reacted and were about to unleash their ultimate skills, he once again hid in his miniature world. The cycle was so repeated that the super-evolved general corpses were about to explode. Imagine facing such an opponent who would sneak up on you from time to time. By the time you react, you'll be hiding in your turtle shell again. Even if you have all the strength in your body, there's nowhere for you to use it. As long as it was a normal person, their mentality would explode. Not to mention these super-evolved general corpses. However, an hour later, when Emosher had just killed over 100 corpse generals, a roar suddenly came from the huge pit. Aolo gaga gaga, roar. This roar was completely different from the roars of other super-evolved general corpses. It was very recognizable. Furthermore, as long as one listened to it once, it would be impossible to forget it again. Emosher was slightly shocked when he heard it. His dragon mind moved and immediately probed into the pit. With that, Emosher was instantly stunned. He saw a large number of super-evolved general corpses crawling out of the huge pit. 125, 100, 200, 500. And it wasn't just that pit. In the entire city, there were super-evolved general corpses crawling out of the hundreds of huge pits. The super-evolved general corpses in the city saw more and more super-evolved general corpses swarming out from all directions. They were all very excited. They kept baring their teeth and opening their mouths, letting out excited roars. Aolo roar. Roar, Aolo. The super-evolved general corpses that had just crawled out of the huge pit didn't dare to roar in response to the super-evolved general corpses. Emosher was shocked. He quickly teleported and arrived at an altitude of 10,000 meters. He looked down from the sky. From this angle, the super-evolved general corpses crawling out of the huge pit looked like the huge pit was constantly spitting out these super-evolved general corpses. The vomiting didn't stop until half an hour later. At this moment, looking down from the ground, he saw that the ground was densely packed with super-evolved general corpses that were 300 meters tall. They were squeezing together, which reminded Emosher of an idiom he had learned in elementary school. Shoulder to shoulder. All the super-evolved general corpses raised their heads and roared at Emosher. Emosher made a rough estimate. There were at least 8,000 super-evolved general corpses here, if not 10,000. This was equivalent to 10,000 Grand Desolate Masters. One had to know that there were at most 30 to 50 Grand Desolate Masters on the Flaming Land. Now there were thousands or even tens of thousands. If another human saw this, they would only be able to flee in defeat. However, Emosher's eyes were sparkling at this moment. These were all kill points. At this moment he didn't hesitate and took out a fist-sized orb. Demon Suppressing Orb. Using a Demon Suppressing Orb for kill points was worth it. On the ground, the super-evolved general corpses couldn't attack Emosher, who was 10,000 meters in the air. They all cried out hungrily. At the same time, their backs started to crack. Two bones extended out from inside. These two bones quickly separated and formed bone wings. Flesh membrane gradually grew on the bone wings. Only then did Emosher understand that these fellows could actually fly. He couldn't wait any longer. Otherwise, should he wait for these guys to fly up and take care of him? He let go of his right hand. The demon-suppressing orb fell rapidly. Soon, hundreds of super-evolved general corpses flew 100 meters into the air. However, at this moment, the demon-suppressing orb fell. These super-evolved general corpses were instantly frozen in the air. All the super-evolved general corpses in the air seemed to have been immobilized. Only the demon-suppressing orb was falling rapidly. Soon, the demon-suppressing orb landed. In the next moment, there was a dazzling light. This dazzling light covered the entire city. Even Emosher, who was in the sky, couldn't open his eyes. However, the strange thing was that such a dazzling light didn't make any sound. After a full 5 minutes, the light gradually faded. Emosher rubbed his eyes. After his eyes adjusted to the normal brightness, he looked at the ground again. He saw that the ground was still the same ground. The city was still the same city. However, the tens of thousands of super-evolved general corpses on the city's ground had long disappeared. Not even a trace of flesh was left. It was as if they had never appeared in this city. The demon-suppressing orb's power was terrifying. Chapter 519. Immortal knew that the demon-suppressing orb was powerful, but he didn't expect it to be so powerful. One had to know that this demon-suppressing orb was something he obtained from signing in at the Blood Race's lair back on Earth. What level was Immortal at that time? Hunter? Or a Grand Hunter? He had already forgotten. But at that time, he had already signed in something that could destroy the super-evolved General Corpse. It could be seen how terrifying the power of the demon-suppressing orb was. Killed 10335 super-evolved General Corpse. Obtained 1033. 5 billion kill points. Total kill points, 1123, 8 billion. You can advance. Do you want to advance immediately? In his mind, the system's voice sounded. When Immortal heard this voice, it was as if he was listening to heavenly music. He could finally advance again. Ever since he became a Grand Desolate Master, which was an evolved dragon, his advancement had been very difficult. Firstly, there weren't that many dragons for him to kill, and secondly, there weren't that many super-evolved General Corpses for him to kill. He didn't expect that there would be as many as tens of thousands of super-evolved General Corpses in this city. He immediately replied in his mind, "Advance." The system's voice sounded frowny-faced. "This advancement will take 5 minutes. Hearing this, Immortal's figure flashed and returned to the miniature space. In the miniature space, he could fast-forward time. With a thought, 5 minutes passed in an instant. The system's notification sounded in his mind again. Frowny face. Advancement successful. Name: Immortal. Level: Level 3 Evolved Dragon, Level 3 Grand Desolate Master, Level 10 Long Nianxia Skills. Click to expand. At this moment, Immortal had advanced to a Level 3 Grand Desolate Master. His strength had increased by more than 10 times. Previously, when he used the dragon-slaying saber, he could only slash out 5 times in a row. But now, it was not a problem for him to slash out 50 times with the dragon-slaying saber. In this case, he didn't have to hide in the miniature world after slashing 2 or 3 times. However, now that all the General Corpses in the city had been destroyed, the tens of thousands of General Corpses hidden under the city had also been destroyed. Where could he find the tens of thousands of General Corpses? Why don't we go underground again to investigate? As soon as this thought appeared, Immortal couldn't help but feel curious. What exactly was it like underground? These General Corpses were all 300 meters tall. More than 10,300 meters tall General Corpses came from underground. Presumably, the underground must be very big. Perhaps it was because of the devil dragon genes in his body. These thoughts kept surfacing in his mind, urging him to find out what was going on. Immortal pondered for a moment and finally made up his mind. Let's go and take a look. Thus he once again came to the outside world. With a thought, Zhang Xian formed 100 clones. The 100 doppelgangers jumped into the 100 huge pits in the city. These doppelgangers were connected to his consciousness. No matter which doppelganger encountered a situation, he would know instantly. These clones continued to head underground. In the first 5 kilometers, he could clearly feel everything that his clones felt. However, after 5 kilometers, his perception became a little blurry. After 10 kilometers, he could no longer sense the existence of these clones. Immortal shook his head. It seemed that using a clone to investigate was not as practical as doing it himself. He no longer hesitated. With a leap, he jumped into a deep hole. The first 10 kilometers had already been scouted by his doppelganger, so he walked very quickly. Not long after, he arrived at 10 kilometers underground. At this point, it was pitch black all around. Of course, with Immortal's strength, he could already see things in the dark. Coupled with the probing of his dragon will, no matter how dark the environment was, it did not affect him at all. He continued to probe deeper into the cave with his dragon will. In his probing, he could still go down for another 10 kilometers. F***ck, what a deep hole. Immortal cursed in his mind as he continued to walk down. The cave was at a 45-degree angle and extended all the way down. After walking for another 20 kilometers, A faint red light began to appear in front of him. At first, Immortal thought that it should be the light from underground magma. After all, the vertical distance from here to the ground was more than 20 kilometers long. Based on the thickness of the flaming land stratum, there should be magma occasionally coming out. However, he soon realized that he was wrong. There was no magma here. At the end of the cave ahead was a cave entrance. His dragon will could not detect what was outside the cave entrance. It seemed that the cave entrance had some kind of barrier that prevented his dragon will from probing outside. He continued to walk forward. Soon he arrived at the cave entrance. At this moment, looking at the situation outside the cave entrance, he was a little stunned. The cave entrance was above a cliff. Looking out from the cave entrance, he could see a large grassland and a winding river outside. The sun shone on the river, making it look like a shining jade belt. Further away, there was a large forest. Further away, there was an undulating snowy mountain. Immortal was a little confused. Hadn't they been going down before? Why did they come out again? At this moment, he could see that there were countless huge footprints on the grassland. They should have been stepped out by the tens of thousands of super-evolved general corpses. Immortal used his dragon will to probe outside. He probed 500 kilometers. He found that there were 3 groups of super-evolved general corpses within 500 kilometers. There were about 100 of them in each group. Immortal was overjoyed. No matter where this place was, killing points was the most important thing. Therefore, with a thought, he disappeared instantly. At the same time, 300 kilometers away, more than 100 super-evolved general corpses were gathered together. Half of these super-evolved general corpses were more than 300 meters tall. The other half were only 100 to 200 meters tall. And from their faces, these super-evolved general corpses should be the children of the super-evolved general corpses. The adult super-evolved general corpses were tearing apart the corpse of a giant beast. This giant beast was 500 to 600 meters long, and the surface of its body was covered with a thick layer of hard armor. But it was forcefully pulled by the super-evolved general corpses. Hiss! The hard armor was forcefully torn off. The scene was a tragic sight. The children of the zombie corpses next to them roared excitedly. Gagagagaga. A super-evolved general corpse tore off a piece of meat that was 10 cubic meters in size and handed it to a zombie child next to it. The corpse child grabbed the meat and began to chew on it like a wild beast. The other zombie children were about to cry from their greed as they kept swallowing their saliva. Loud gurgling sounds came from their throats. But none of the children dared to snatch the meat from the hands of the previous child. In just a moment, this giant beast was torn into hundreds of pieces and divided into the hands of all the general corpses. All the general corpses were like wild beasts as they began to tear the meat in their hands. It was also at this moment that a figure quietly appeared in the sky. In his right hand he held a 2-meter-long, lusterless, ordinary pig slaughtering knife. Chapter 520. While the general corpses were eating the giant beast's corpse, a figure quietly appeared in the sky. He was dressed in black and looked ordinary. In his right hand was a 2-meter-long saber. The saber did not have any luster, and its style was ordinary. It looked like a butcher's knife on earth. Those super-evolved general corpses were tearing at the meat in their hands. The smell of blood covered the smell of Immortal's arrival. As a result, these super-evolved general corpses did not notice Immortal's appearance at all. Immortal raised the dragon-slaying saber in his right hand. Immortal first plundered the memories of a few super-evolved general corpses. Among them, the memories of one of the super-evolved general corpses were much clearer than the other super-evolved general corpses. From the memories of this super-evolved general corpse, Immortal discovered a shocking fact. This place was actually a general corpse world. All the general corpses in this world were super-evolved general corpses. In this world, there were hundreds of millions of super-evolved general corpses. On the surface, the flaming land looked like a planet. In fact, deep underground, it was connected to the general corpse world. Previously, the general corpses had discovered this and released their general corpse virus on the flaming land. In their plan, the flaming land would soon be filled with general corpses. After all the humans on the flaming land had become general corpses, these super-evolved general corpses would be able to order the general corpses on Earth to do many things. For example, building houses, mining, quarrying, and so on. After discovering this fact, Emoshur was somewhat speechless. Previously, discovering the 10,000 dragon realm was enough to give him a headache. Now a general corpse world had appeared. However, in comparison, the general corpse world was much less dangerous than the 10,000 dragon realm. Moreover, the appearance of this general corpse world provided Emoshur with an excellent way to obtain kill points. At this moment, Emoshur raised the dragon-slaying saber in his right hand. He swung it at the general corpse tribe on the ground. There was no sound, no light, no sound. On the ground, a huge ravine that was more than 500 meters wide and 5 kilometers long instantly appeared. Those super-evolved general corpses instantly disappeared. What replaced them was the blood water that was several meters deep in the huge ravine. At the same time, a system notification appeared in Emoshur's mind. Frowny face. 105 super-evolved general corpses killed. 10. 5 billion kill points gained. 1/ was equivalent to 10. 5 billion kill points. According to the system notification, if he wanted to evolve into a Tier 4 dragon, he would need to obtain 10 trillion kill points. However, Emoshur had plenty of time. After exterminating the corpse general tribe, Emoshur had a thought. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the second corpse general tribe. This corpse general tribe had over 200 super-evolved corpse generals. With a single slash, Emoshur annihilated all 200 super-evolved corpses. The third general tribe had over 100 super-evolved general corpses. Emoshur still only used one strike. Speaking of which, after reaching the third stage, the power of the dragon Salyer had also increased by a lot. With one slash, he could kill 200 to 300 super-evolved general corpses. Within a radius of 1,000 kilometers, there were many corpse general tribes. Emoshur swung his saber 50 times. With every slash, a corpse general tribe would be destroyed. The 50 slashes allowed him to gain more than 500 billion kill points. At this time, the energy in his body was almost depleted. He returned to the miniature world. Previously, when he returned to the miniature world, he would wait for his energy to recover before coming out. But now, Emoshur had realized that in this world, he actually had many ways to quickly recover his energy. The most typical one was that he could recover his energy with just a thought. Or he could fast-forward time. Originally, it was 2 days, but now he could fast-forward it to 1 second. This way, he could quickly recover his energy. However, Emoshur had always been waiting for time to recover his energy, so he had formed a mindset, so he did not think of it before. At this moment, with a thought, the energy in his body instantly reached its peak. Thus, he once again came to the corpse general world. The corpse general world was extremely large, and was simply divided into north, south, east, and west. At this time, Emoshur was in the eastern continent. And this eastern continent could be simply divided into mountains, plains, forests, deserts, glaciers, and oceans. Emoshur was currently in the plains. According to what he knew, there were over 10,000 corpse general tribes in the plains. This made Emoshur secretly happy. As long as he destroyed these 10,000 corpse general tribes, he should be able to level up again. Previously, he was still surprised by the sudden appearance of the corpse general world. Now he understood that this corpse general world was here to give him kill points. Next, Emoshur continued to slaughter these corpse general tribes. Every time he slashed 50 times, he would obtain about 500 billion kill points. When his energy was depleted, he would return to the miniature world to quickly recover. Then he would come out again to slaughter the corpse general tribes. In this way, in just 1 day, Emoshur's kill points had reached 5 trillion. On the second day, the 10,000 corpse general tribes in the plains had really been slaughtered by him. At this moment, the system's notification sounded in his mind again. He could level up again. After returning to the miniature world, Emoshur leveled up again. His level had already reached the level of a rank 4 evolved dragon, which was also a level 4 Grand Desolate Master. Next, if he wanted to level up again, he would need 100 trillion kill points. Looking at this number, Emosher felt a little worried for the system. The kill points system was already a little broken. If this continued, wouldn't it collapse even more? At this moment, the system's voice sounded frowny face after reaching the level of a rank 5 evolved dragon. The miniature world will automatically level up by 1. The system's words made Emosher feel a little excited. The miniature world's current size had already reached 10 million square kilometers, which was slightly bigger than Wuxia on Earth. If it continued to level up, how big would it be? This filled him with anticipation. He came to the corpse general world. With a teleport, he arrived in the forest. The forest here was not divided into many areas like the forests on Earth. There were Amazon jungle, Burmese jungle, and so on. The forests of the eastern continent were connected into an extremely huge area. In this huge forest, there were many tribes. And because the forest was rich in resources, not only were there many tribes in the forest, but they were also much bigger. Usually, a small tribe would have 300 people. A bigger tribe would even have 800 to 1,000 people. Of course, this was a good thing for Emosher. At this moment, he was teleporting forward while checking all the movements within a radius of 1,000 kilometers. Soon he found a tribe of 500 people. At this moment, the tribe was in the middle of a hunting activity. The 500 people went out together and chased a group of giant beasts to the lakeside in the forest. These giant beasts did not know how to swim, so they were surrounded by the corpse general tribes in a fan shape. Chapter 521. This tribe of 500 people was surrounding dozens of giant beasts that were 300 to 500 meters long by the lakeside. At this moment, Emosher's figure quietly appeared 1,000 meters above these people. After appearing, Emosher used the stealth camouflage skill. He blended his figure into the background of the blue sky. The super-evolved zombies on the ground did not know Emosher had appeared. Emosher raised the ordinary-looking butcher's knife in his right hand. He waved it lightly at the ground. The next moment, a 10-kilometer-long and 300 meters wide gully appeared by the lakeside. All the super-evolved zombies, including the giant beasts, were turned into a bloody pulp. In this huge gully, there was a layer of blood that was about half a meter deep. At the same time, the gully connected to the lake. The lake water immediately poured into the gully. However, the gully that Emosher had drawn was too big and too deep. Even after all the lake water had poured into the gully was still not filled. After Emosher had leveled up, the power of his knife was terrifying. A system notification appeared in his mind. Killed 522 super-evolved zombies. 53 super-evolved zombies. Obtained 5 billion kill points. Obtaining 5 billion kill points with a single slash was a pleasant surprise to Emosher. Furthermore, killing a super-evolved general zombie beast would grant the same benefits as killing a super-evolved general zombie beast. This made Emosher very happy. After all, there were more zombies than super-evolved zombies in the forest. Among them, there were more super-evolved zombie beasts than super-evolved zombie beasts. This was definitely good news for Emosher. Next, he would not only hunt down the super-evolved zombie generals, but also the super-evolved zombie beasts. In the beginning, this matter did not attract much attention. After all, it was normal for 1 or 2 tribes living in the forest to be wiped out. It would not attract the super-evolved zombies' attention at all. However, on the second day they noticed that something was not right. This was because in just one day, 8 tribes were wiped out. This was definitely not normal. In addition, huge gullies were constantly appearing on the ground. Each gully was several kilometers long and 300 to 500 meters wide. This was definitely not something an ordinary super-evolved zombie beast could do. In the depths of the forest, between 2 mountains, the mountain was about 10 kilometers tall and stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The entire mountainside had been hollowed out. Although the super-evolved zombies were not on good terms with each other, if something important happened, all the leaders of the tribes would gather here for a discussion. Among these tribal chiefs, there was one who was slightly older, but looked stronger than the other tribal chiefs. He was the leader of all the evolved mutated corpse generals in the forest. All of the general corpses had to call him head corpse. As for the conflicts between the tribes, he would not care about them. After all, this was part of the law of nature. But now a large number of tribes were being massacred, and a large number of super-evolved zombie generals and super-evolved zombie beasts were being hunted and slaughtered. At this moment, he looked at the leader of the 10,000 super-evolved zombies in the cave. He kept roaring in his throat. If a human heard him, they would think that he was a wild beast roaring in a frenzy. But that was actually the language of the general corpses. One of the tribal chiefs said, "Another tribe has been wiped out. We must find out who did this. There's no need to investigate." A youth from our tribe saw that guy from afar. As soon as he said this, the rest of the tribe leaders all looked over at him. "Who did this? Tell us. Tell us. I want to tear that guy into pieces." The tribal chiefs all bared their fangs and spoke aggressively. The tribal chief said, "I saw that guy appear in the sky with my own eyes." With a swing of his blade, he slaughtered the entire tribe below. What surprised me the most was that he was a human. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire huge cave suddenly fell silent. The sound of falling leaves could be heard. After a short while, a tribal chief questioned, "How is this possible? How can a lowly and insignificant creature like a human possess such great strength? Moreover, the general corpses are unkillable. How did he kill so many super-evolved zombies?" The tribal chief shook his head and replied, "I don't know the specifics. I'm not too sure about the specifics. In short, what I said is what I saw. As for why he was able to kill the super-evolved zombies that were originally unkillable, I think it has something to do with the blade in his hand." When the other tribal chiefs heard that, they all shook their heads. "Nonsense. That's impossible. Over the years, we've captured many humans for experiments. In the end, it proved that no matter how advanced the weapons used by humans are, they can't kill us general corpses. That's right. The super-evolved zombies are unkillable. Even if they are killed, they can only be killed by the other super-evolved zombies or zombie beasts of our world. How could they be killed by the inferior creatures of that inferior world? You're just spouting nonsense." When the tribal chief saw that he couldn't get through, he could only shake his head and stop talking. He knew that if he said those words, he would be mocked and questioned by the other tribal chiefs. That was why he didn't say anything for an entire day. Later, he heard that 8 tribes had been wiped out in one day yesterday. Only then did he feel that he had to stand up and say something. In the end, after he said that, he was immediately questioned by the other tribal chiefs. However, he didn't care. After all, he had already guessed that would be the result. That was all the information he could provide to the tribal leaders. It was best if they believed him. If they didn't, they would be slaughtered by that inferior creature. At that moment, the corpse finally spoke. "Shut up, all of you." As soon as he said this, the previously noisy and huge cave immediately quieted down. The corpse glanced at the 10,000 super-evolved zombies. Finally he spoke. "No matter if what he said is true or not, we have to treat it seriously. I've decided to immediately send out a team of zombies to investigate the forest. At the same time, we need a specialized hunting team. If what he said is true, then our hunting team can target that inferior human and make corresponding arrangements." When he said that, the other tribal chiefs naturally had no objections. Therefore, in the afternoon of that day, a team of about 200 general corpses set off in Immortal's direction. Chapter 522. This morning, Immortal massacred another tribe. He gained more than 40 billion kill points. Compared to before, this was much faster. However, Immortal did a rough calculation. If he massacred 8 tribes in a day and gained 50 billion kill points from each tribe, that would be 400 billion kill points a day. And to advance to rank 5, he would need 100 trillion kill points. In other words, he estimated that he would need more than 200 days to advance to rank 5. Although this was already very fast compared to other Grand Desolate Masters. However, Emosher felt that this was still not fast enough. He had to increase his strength to a sufficient level before the giant dragons arrived at the flaming land again. When those proud and arrogant dragons arrived at the flaming land, they would exclaim, "Damn, how can there be such a strong existence on the flaming land?" It seemed that he had to work a little harder. He had to at least increase his kill points to 500 billion kill points a day. Next, Emosher began to madly rush on his way and kill. In the end, the results were gratifying. He had gained 700 billion kill points. It was far beyond his expectations. This was because not only did he kill those tribes, but he also encountered a large group of super-evolved general snakes. In this group, there were more than 2,000 super-evolved general snake. This made Emosher's gains far exceed his expectations. He thought that if he encountered an even larger group of general beasts, it would definitely be great news for him. Just like this, on the third and fourth day, Emosher could gain 500 billion kill points a day. At this time, his kill points had reached close to 3 trillion. On this day, Emosher had just massacred another tribe of general beasts. Suddenly, an urgent alarm sounded in his mind. Beep, beep, beep. Virtual sentry towers had been set up at the places he had passed by. These alarms were from the virtual sentry towers. He immediately connected his dragon consciousness to the virtual sentry towers. He saw that within the range of the virtual sentry towers, there were more than 20 super-evolved general corpses that were following his footsteps. When Emosher saw so many super-evolved general corpses, he was not afraid at all. Instead, he was secretly delighted. His initial estimate was that there should be about 100,000 super-evolved general corpses. He had worked hard for 4 days and only managed to get 3 trillion kill points. Once these super-Yi gathered the corpses, they would be able to get 10 trillion in an instant. These guys were just here to give him gifts. Therefore, he deliberately slowed down and waited for the super-evolved zombies to catch up. In the afternoon, when the red clouds filled the sky, the super-evolved zombies finally caught up. They were very smart. They chose different directions and formed a huge encirclement. Then he slowly drew attention to this encirclement. This encirclement was not only on the ground, but also in the air. In the air, there were tens of thousands of flying super-evolved beasts. These flying super-evolved beasts were trained after subduing the zombies. They were obedient to their master's orders. All of the corpse generals saw the human who had just slaughtered a tribe of 600 people. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. Even though he knew that it was a human who had slaughtered so many super-evolved zombies, he was still shocked. But when she saw him standing in front of her, she was still shocked. It was like a human hearing that an ant had massacred dozens of villages. Although he knew it a long time ago, when the ant stood in front of him, the shock and fear in his heart could not be any greater. These 100,000 corpse generals, together with more than 10,000 corpse generals, surrounded Emosher. And this time they had learned their lesson. They did not waste any more words with Emosher. They did not wait until they could not defeat him before using their ultimate move. Instead, they had long prepared their ultimate move and used it on Emosher right away. Therefore, all the super-evolved zombies had dozens of thick sanguisurincus growing on their feet. Among the 100,000 super-evolved zombies, millions of sanguisurincus that were as thick as giant pythons surged toward Emosher from all directions. In the air, the corpse general beasts also used their ultimate moves. The bones in their bodies kept cracking. Their bodies began to morph. Emosher shook his head slightly. He did not wait for these guys to finish using their ultimate moves. The pig slaughtering knife in his right hand disappeared. In its place was a fist-sized bead. At first glance, one would feel that this pearl was sparkling and translucent. There were no impurities at all. But if one felt it carefully, they would feel that it contained an extremely terrifying energy. This energy seemed to have the power to destroy heaven and earth. The next moment he flipped his right hand. Then, the bead fell down to the ground. In the process of the bead falling, time seemed to have stopped, and the scene seemed to have frozen. Those ferocious corpse general beasts that were about to pounce on Emosher in the air were now quietly frozen in the air, not moving at all. Those python-like sanguisurincus that were about to pounce on Emosher also stopped in an instant. They did not move at all. In the entire scene, There was only one bead that was slowly falling. A moment later, this demon-suppressing bead landed. At this moment, there was a dazzling brilliance. The entire world was swallowed by this dazzling light. But strangely, there was no sound in such a dazzling light. It was as if a mute button had been pressed. After a full 5 minutes, this dazzling light slowly disappeared. Heaven and earth, trees and everything around slowly appeared again. At this moment, all the super-evolved corpse general beasts in the sky had disappeared. The sky was extremely clear. In the blue sky, an old bird flew past. A beautiful world. On the ground, the millions of python-like Sanguisurincus that were about to surge towards Immortal had completely disappeared. The 100,000 super-evolved corpse general beasts had also completely disappeared. It was as if they had never existed. At the same time, a system notification appeared in Immortal's mind. Frowny face killed 111,203 super-evolved corpse general beasts. Obtained 110,1203 million kill points. Immortal looked at this and nodded in satisfaction. With just one attack, he had obtained so many kill points. If he did it a few more times, wouldn't he be able to level up in minutes? However, this was only an ideal situation. This time, he had destroyed so many corpse general beasts. Next, these corpse general beasts would either send stronger existences to cause trouble for him, or they would hide and not meet him. But they would definitely not send such a large number of super-evolved corpse general beasts to surround and kill him. Because they were not stupid. They knew that sending so many super-evolved corpse general beasts was just sending them to their deaths. If he continued to hunt super-evolved corpse general beasts here, the speed would not be as fast. But now he had already obtained 1/10 of the kill points. Was the remaining 9/10 still far away? Chapter 523. Over the next few days, things developed as Immortal expected. Those super-evolved corpse generals no longer came to cause trouble for him. Instead, they all went into hiding. At least on the surface, Immortal could no longer detect any super-evolved corpse generals. Since he couldn't find any super-evolved corpse generals, he could only go kill those corpse generals. At the same time, in a huge cave at the foot of the mountain, the corpse head was sitting on a high stone platform. Below him, there were more than 50 tribal leaders. Compared to the tens of thousands of tribal leaders a few days ago, the current situation could only be described as bleak. The tribal leaders had gloomy expressions. The corpse generals below didn't dare to say anything. After a long while, the corpse head spoke. "Do any of you have any ideas?" The 50 tribal leaders remained silent. The corpse head snorted. "Normally, you all act like a tyrant in your own tribes, but now that there's an enemy invading, you're all out of ideas. What kind of fucking tribal leader are you?" The tribal leaders all secretly complained in their hearts. "Normally, you act like a tyrant in front of us, but now that there's an enemy invading, you're also out of ideas? Then what's the use of having a corpse like you?" Of course, these were only the tribal leaders' thoughts. They naturally couldn't express it on the surface. The corpse head looked at the tribal leaders. They all looked at each other. This made him even angrier. If you still can't think of a solution, then don't be a tribal leader. When the corpse generals heard this, their expressions all changed. What did it mean if a corpse general leader was removed from his position midway? It meant that the tribal leaders might very well send them to Thousand Poisons Ridge. That was equivalent to giving them a death sentence. The corpse general leaders all looked at each other. They all saw the fear in each other's eyes. At this moment, a corpse general leader suddenly had an idea and said, "Corpse head, I have an idea." The other tribal leaders all looked over, their eyes filled with hope. The corpse head also looked at the tribal leader. "What, speak?" The tribal leader replied, "We can lure that guy to Thousand Poisons Ridge. Let the corpse general beasts of Thousand Poisons Ridge deal with him." When the tribal leaders heard this, they were all overjoyed. How could they have forgotten about this? In the eyes of the corpse general beasts, Thousand Poisons Ridge was a forbidden area. Since ancient times, the corpse general beasts were not allowed to enter as they pleased. Therefore, they couldn't react in time. When they heard the leaders' words, They all came to a realization. The corpse's eyes lit up. The 10,000 Poisons Ridge not only had tens of thousands of poison general corpse beasts, but many of them were also in groups. The small ones were a group of 1 or 200, while the large ones were tens of millions. Any super-evolved general corpse, no matter how powerful it was, would basically die if it went to the 1,000 Poisons Ridge. Even someone as strong as Corpse did not dare to casually go there. The corpse nodded in agreement. Very well, then we'll lure him to the Myriad Poisons Ridge. Yes. The group of leaders responded one after another. The corpse reminded him again. Remember, do not reveal our plan to anyone. Just arrange for these corpse generals to arrive at the designated location. The corpse generals nodded their heads once more. In the following days, Immortal continued to slaughter these corpse generals in the forest. However, although there were many corpse general beasts, not many of them had reached super evolution. Therefore, his kill points increased at a slower rate. He was wondering if he should look for super-evolved general corpses in other places. From the memories of a few super-evolved general corpses, he knew that this world actually had cities. East, south, west, and north. Each of these cities had over 100 general corpses. A few of these cities had a population of over 100,000. Most of them had a population of over 1 million. If he went to these cities, he would definitely be able to obtain quite a bit of kill points. But at the same time, Immortal also knew that the more populated a city was, the more experts there would be. Furthermore, he already knew that super-evolved general corpses were not the strongest experts in this world. Above level 10 super-evolved general corpses were ancestral corpses. Those were existences that surpassed the Grand Desolate Master realm. With Immortal's current strength, it would probably be quite difficult for him to deal with ancestral corpses. Moreover, after his sea dragon clone evolved into a level 10 strong mutant wild beast, its level never increased again. Even though Immortal's level was constantly increasing, it was still a level 10 desolate beast. This was probably due to the limitations of the Dragon Pearl Shards. It only had 2 Dragon Pearl Shards now, and was unable to form a complete Dragon Pearl, so it could not evolve any further. It was unknown when it would be lucky enough to obtain a 3rd Dragon Pearl Shard. Perhaps when that time came, the Sea Dragon clone's strength would receive a qualitative increase. On this day, Immortal continued to farm monsters in the forest. He inadvertently detected that there were more than 50 super-evolved general corpses, more than 100 kilometers away. This surprised Immortal. These super-evolved general corpses had been hiding for the past few days. Why did they suddenly appear? He plundered the memories of a few of the super-evolved general corpses. He discovered that these super-evolved general corpses had all received orders from their tribe leaders to gather here. Immortal found it strange. These tribe leaders only said that they wanted these super-evolved general corpses to gather here, but they did not say what they were here for. It seemed like there was some kind of conspiracy. However, no matter what conspiracy they had, he would kill them first. Thinking of this, Immortal teleported and arrived above these general corpses. The dragon-slaying saber slashed downward. Without a sound, these 50 super-evolved general corpses were slaughtered. More than 5 billion kill points appeared in Immortal's mind. After killing these super-evolved general corpses, Immortal continued to slaughter the surrounding general corpses. More than an hour later, more than 50 super-evolved general corpses appeared. Just like before, Immortal slaughtered them all. More than an hour later, more than 50 super-evolved general corpses appeared. After the 5th wave of general corpses appeared, Immortal could already tell. These general corpses were all pointing to the southeast. It was obvious that they were trying to lure him there. Logically speaking, since they wanted to lure him there, he should naturally go in the opposite direction. However, Immortal did not do that. He followed them and saw what they were up to. Even if there were stronger experts there, or if there was some danger waiting for him, Immortal could escape into the miniature world and easily resolve the danger. Therefore, Immortal followed them, and there were 50 waves of super-evolved general corpses. More than 50 waves of super-evolved general corpses meant that there were more than 2,500 of them. Immortal was a little surprised. In order to lure him here, These general corpses had really put in a lot of effort. They directly used more than 2,500 super-evolved general corpses as bait. After killing 2 more waves of super-evolved general corpses, Immortal looked at a mountain. The mountain was about 5 kilometers tall. The mountain was densely wooded. Halfway up the mountain, smoke lingered. It looked like a fairyland. Chapter 524. Immortal was led to a mountain by the corpses. The mountain was about 5 kilometers tall. Halfway up the mountain, clouds and mist lingered, making it look like a fairyland. From the clouds and mist, there was a waterfall that fell all the way to the foot of the mountain. If it was on Earth, this place would look like the residence of an immortal. But at this moment, when Immortal probed out, he found that there were tens of thousands of corpse beasts on this mountain. Among these corpse beasts, the weakest ones were level 1 super-evolved corpse beasts. They were far from what ordinary corpse beasts in the forest could compare to. Moreover, these corpse beasts did not move alone but in groups. The small groups had hundreds of them. The big ones had thousands, or even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. When Immortal saw this, he finally understood what these corpse beasts were up to. It turned out that they wanted to lure him here, and let these corpse beasts deal with him. To be honest, these corpse beasts were indeed very strong. The most terrifying thing was that there were too many of them. Even those corpse general tribes would have to flee in front of these super-evolved corpse general beasts. But to Immortal, this was killing points. When he investigated the situation here, he was so excited that his eyes shone brightly. He really should thank these corpse generals. Without them, he probably wouldn't have been able to find such a place. In order to thank these corpse generals, Immortal killed the last wave of super-evolved corpse generals. Then with a teleport he arrived halfway up the mountain. Here, there was a group of more than 500 corpse beasts. All of them had pointy mouths and monkey cheeks. They looked like monkeys. However, it was much bigger than a monkey. They were more than 50 meters tall. They were chasing and playing among the giant trees. When they noticed a human figure in the air, they immediately cried out excitedly. Squeak, squeak, squeak. They called their friends and surrounded Immortal. They gathered below Immortal and screamed excitedly. It could be seen that their eyes were blood red. Their claws were also blood red. They must have seen a lot of blood on a daily basis. Immortal waited for the group of more than 500 corpse beasts to gather at his feet, and continued to jump into the air, trying to catch him. In his right hand, the dragon Salyer appeared. Then, the dragon-slaying saber in his hand slashed down at the over 500 half-zombie beasts below. Silently, a huge ravine more than 500 meters wide and 2 kilometers long appeared in the forest below. More than 500 corpse beast commanders were reduced to a bloody pulp in the ravine. As for his kill points, it had increased by more than 50 billion. Awesome. This was much better than killing those zombie beasts in the ordinary forest below. After killing these corpse general beasts, another 1,000 or so corpse general beasts surrounded them. These were some flying corpse generals. They looked a little like flamingos. However, the difference between them and the flamingos was that their entire bodies were blood red. Their claws and beaks were sharper than the flamingos. They surrounded Immortal, who was in the air. Immortal already knew that these super-evolved beasts were poisonous. Even the air in this mountain was highly toxic. Even a level 10 super-evolved corpse would not be able to live for more than half an hour after entering this mountain. However, Immortal's body was impervious to poison, so the air here did not affect him at all. This time, because these flying corpse beasts were slightly scattered, Immortal used 3 slashes in a row to kill them all. A notification came from his mind. He had obtained more than 100 billion kill points. If this continued, 100 trillion kill points would not be a problem at all. After killing for 2 days, this hillside was already filled with huge ravines. Every huge ravine city was covered in blood-red soil. Immortal looked at the kill points in his mind. 983,988 billion. He was less than 2 trillion away from leveling up again. However, at this time, the energy in his body had been mostly consumed. Thus he returned to the miniature world. With a thought, the energy in his body quickly filled up. Once again, he returned to reality and continued to fight. An instant of charging was enough for him to slash out more than 50 times. As the saying goes, charging for 5 minutes, talking for 2 hours. Next, after destroying 3 more groups of corpse beasts, a notification came from his mind. Frowny face, the kill points have reached the promotion standard. Do you want to promote now? Emosure was overjoyed. With a thought, he returned to the miniature world. In his mind he said, promote. This promotion will take 5 minutes. With a thought, Emosure fast-forwarded the time. 5 minutes were completed in an instant. Another notification came from his mind. Frowny face, promotion successful. Name, Emosure. Level 5 Evolved Dragon, Level 5 Great Desolate Master. Level 10 Long Yen Shi. Ability. Click to expand. Emosure stretched out his right hand and clenched it into a fist. He stretched it out again and clenched it into a fist again. He felt the surging energy in his body. Emosure was secretly happy. He had finally reached the 5th step. Level 5 Evolved Dragon. He estimated that with his current strength, combined with the Dragon Salure, he could almost beat up a level 10 Evolved Dragon. In his mind, a system notification came again. Frowny face, Level 5 Evolved Dragon. Miniature world can be upgraded. Do you want to level up now? Emosure nodded. Level up. This upgrade will take 72 hours. During the upgrade, it will be locked. The host will no longer be able to control anything in the miniature world, nor will he be able to enter or exit the miniature world. Hearing this notification, Emosure was not dissatisfied at all. Instead, he nodded in satisfaction. He had killed so many corpse beasts in a row. Although his body could instantly recover in the miniature world, his mental fatigue could also be recovered. But mentally, he couldn't help but feel a little tired. He even felt a little annoyed. Think about it, if you had to do the same thing for more than 10 days, dozens of days, or even hundreds of days, would you feel annoyed? Therefore, he could use these 72 hours to rest well. Emma was surprised to see that Emosure had not left. It had been a long time. Emosure had basically returned to the miniature world and left in an instant. Sometimes, before she could even react, he had already left again. This time, he stopped. She asked, Brother Emo, will you be staying for a while this time? Emosure nodded. Yes. Emma was overjoyed and quickly said, Then I'll go prepare some food for you. Emosure nodded again. At the same time, Happy heard the voice and walked out of the room not far away. When she heard that Emosure would be staying for a while this time, her face was full of smiles. Her eyes, which seemed to be able to speak, also curved into 2 crescent moons. Emosure immediately felt that spring had arrived. Flowers were blooming, birds were singing, and flowers were fragrant. Just looking at her smile was a kind of enjoyment. Chapter 525. Emosure stayed in the miniature world for 3 days. During these 3 days, Happy and Emma cooked different dishes for Emosure every day. Previously, when he was in the miniature world, he could eat whatever he wanted with just a thought, and a table would appear in front of him. However, Emosure still felt that something was missing from the dishes that had been transformed into this way. Now, the food made by the 2 of them made him feel the same as when he was eating in the past. It was rare for Emosure to enjoy such leisure time. The 4 of them chatted and laughed while eating. During these 3 days, Emosure watched the moon rise and the sunset with Happy every day. The days passed comfortably. Finally, 3 days later, Emosure was taking a noon nap. A system notification sounded in his mind. Upgrade complete. Emosure opened his eyes. He looked around. There didn't seem to be any changes around him. However, when he closed his eyes and sensed carefully, he found a shocking change. In the past, the miniature world was just a large piece of land. Outside of this land, everything was in chaos. Now, after the miniature world was upgraded, it had become a planet. The size of the planet was about the same as Earth in the past. Emosure was very surprised. The miniature world had become Earth? The area had expanded too much. However, on this planet, other than the large area that Emosure had modified, the rest was barren. Emosure began to modify this planet in his surprise. Emosher's modification was actually very simple. Yangtze River, Great Wall. Yellow Mountain, Yellow River. Pacific Ocean, Antarctica. Mount Everest, Amazon jungle. In short, he copied everything on Earth here. At the same time, he added many magnificent sceneries of the flaming land. For example, the sunrise of East Pole Island and the aurora of North Pole Island. His modification was very fast, almost completed in just a few seconds. The moment the modification was completed, a gust of fresh air rushed to his face. This Earth was not as bad as the Earth where Emosher lived before. It was also not like the Earth after transmigration where there were zombies everywhere. This was a virgin land that had not been developed yet. In the future, this would be my world. Emosher thought to himself. Moreover, this place couldn't be called a miniature space anymore. Emosher thought for a moment. He was too lazy to think of an awesome name, so he decided to call it Earth Space. Everything in this Earth Space was under Emosher's control. If he wanted the mountains to collapse, the mountains would collapse. If he wanted the Earth to crack, the Earth would crack. If he was happy, he could make the Yangtze and Yellow rivers flow all over the planet. The Great Wall could encircle the Earth twice. With just a thought, happy Emma and Emma's son flew into the air. The four of them began to travel around the world. Emma and Happy looked at the scenery of Earth that they were once familiar with, and their eyes brimmed with tears of excitement. He took them around the Earth space. After they had seen all the sights on Earth, Emosher let them return to their original positions. After that, Emosher bid farewell to the three of them and left Earth. He returned to the Thousand Poisons Ridge. Using his draconic senses, he quickly found a group of super-evolved zombie beasts. After that, he teleported to the mountain stream where the super-evolved zombie beasts were. With one slash, more than 800 super-evolved zombie beasts were turned into a bloody pulp. In his mind, there were more than 80 billion kill points. Now that he had become a 5th-rank evolved dragon, if he wanted to level up, he would need 1,000 trillion kill points. However, there were many super-evolved zombie beasts in the Thousand Poisons Ridge. It shouldn't be difficult to get 10 million kill points. Over the next few days, Emosher had been slaughtering these zombie beasts in the Thousand Poisons Ridge. His kill points were quickly accumulating. At the same time, in the huge cave, the corpse asked a tribe leader below. That human should be dead. That human should be dead. Tell me, how did he die? Let me be happy to. The tribe leader hesitated for a moment before replying. He is not dead yet. The corpse frowned and asked the tribe leader, what happened? What happened? The tribe leader replied, through our surveillance, we found that the poisonous fog there has no effect on him at all. The corpse asked again, what about the zombie beasts? There are so many super-evolved zombie beasts there. I don't believe that those super-evolved zombie beasts have no effect on him. Especially those hundreds and thousands of zombie beasts. They can easily tear him apart. The tribe leader replied, he killed a lot of super-evolved zombie beasts. And it seems that the more he kills, the more excited he gets. He specifically targets large groups of zombie beasts. According to our estimates, he has slaughtered more than 50 zombie beasts in the past few days. The corpse leader's expression changed when he heard that. Is this guy that strong? The other 50 or so tribe leaders didn't dare to make a sound. After a long while, the corpse leader said, if that's the case, it seems that we have to ask the corpse ancestor to come out. The tribe leaders were all surprised when they heard that. The corpse ancestor's strength was above the super-evolved zombie beasts. Even a level 10 super-evolved zombie beasts had to be respectful in front of the corpse ancestor. If the corpse ancestor came out, killing that kid would be a piece of cake. But the problem was that the corpse ancestor hadn't appeared for a long time. Normally, the corpse ancestor wouldn't appear unless it was an extremely important matter. Although the matter this time was rather important, it couldn't even be considered very important, let alone extremely important. Would the corpse ancestor come out? The corpse leader looked at the suspicious gazes of the zombie leaders and shook his head. I know what you're worried about. But this time, we have to ask the corpse ancestor to come out no matter what. If we're late, I'm afraid it'll be too late. I'm afraid our entire zombie beasts will be annihilated. The zombie leaders were all shocked when they heard that. A mere human could cause the entire zombie beasts to be annihilated? Was this a joke? But looking at the corpse leader's expression, it clearly wasn't a joke. The expressions of all the corpse commanders turned solemn. On this day, Emosher's kill points had reached more than 200 trillion after continuously slaughtering these zombie beasts. With less than 800 trillion, he would be able to level up again. But in the past few days, zombie beasts that numbered more than 100,000 had rarely appeared. First of all, Emosher had already annihilated many large zombie beast clans. Secondly, these zombie beasts had a certain level of intelligence. They had long given up on dealing with this human when they saw how difficult it was to deal with him. Instead, they had all gone into hiding, afraid that this human would cause trouble for them. Speaking of which, these zombie beasts were all very bitter in their hearts. In the past, when those humans came to this mountain, they fought to kill them. But this time, this human was simply too valiant. They couldn't wait to hide, so how would they dare to show themselves in front of this human? Chapter 526. Emosher was a little depressed at this moment. When he first arrived, the Thousand Poisons Ridge's corpse general beasts were still in groups, and it was a scene of prosperity. Why were there suddenly no corpse general beasts? If these corpse general beasts knew what Emosher was thinking, they would probably beat him to death. Wasn't it all your fault? Why are you still pretending to be innocent? On this day, Emosher finally discovered another group of corpse general beasts. Moreover, there were more than 10 million corpse general beasts in this group. It was a group of corpse general ants. It was the largest group of corpse general beasts in the entire Thousand Poisons Ridge. Although each corpse general ant was only the size of a house cat, due to their numbers advantage, no corpse general beasts in the entire Thousand Poisons Ridge dared to fight them. It could be said that this group of corpse general ants was at the top of the food chain in the Thousand Poisons Ridge. This group of corpse general ants had roamed the Thousand Poisons Ridge for millions of years. They were indifferent to life and death, and would fight if they were dissatisfied. No corpse general beasts dared to provoke them. It could be said that other than themselves, no other creature in this world was their enemy. When Emosher discovered this group of corpse general ants, he was so excited that his body trembled. He originally thought that it would take a few more months for him to level up. He did not expect happiness to come so suddenly. The 5 mountains below were all nests of corpse general ants. Emosher was thinking of a way to lure all the corpse general ants out, and then use a demon-suppressing orb to deal with them. After 2 hours of trying, he failed. At most, only one mountain's corpse general ants would come out each time. At this rate, wouldn't he be wasting 4 more demon-suppressing orbs? Moreover, if he killed all the corpse general ants in one mountain, the rest of the corpse general ants might hide inside and not come out. Emosher thought for a moment, and finally slapped his head. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. How could he forget this? However, just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly frowned. This was because he detected a figure rapidly flying towards him from 1,000 kilometers away. What surprised him the most was that this figure didn't use any energy when flying. It did not have wings or any auxiliary flying devices. It just stood in the air and flew toward him at a speed of dozens of kilometers per second. Emosher used the eye of the demon dragon to check his level. Type: General Corpse. Level: Level 1 Corpse Ancestor. What the hell is Corpse Ancestor? Emosher asked. In his mind, the system's voice sounded frowny face. Level 1 Corpse Ancestor is an existence that surpasses the Grand Desolate Master realm. Emosher understood. So it was a realm even higher than the Grand Desolate Master. It seemed that he had to be careful. Soon, the corpse ancestor arrived within 10 kilometers of Emosher. Emosher condensed a pair of devil dragon wings on his back and flew into the air. The two of them faced each other from a distance of 10 kilometers. With their strength, although they were 5 kilometers away, they could even see each other's hair. At their level, 10 kilometers was the maximum distance they could react to. If they were any closer and one of them suddenly attacked, the other wouldn't be able to react in time. Emosher sized up the corpse ancestor. He was not hundreds of meters tall like the other general corpses. He was only the size of a normal human. The skin on his body was wrinkled. If someone with OCD were to see this, they would probably want to flatten him with an iron. On his wrinkled head, there were a few thin strands of long white hair. The white hair fluttered in the wind, giving off an ethereal feeling. His face, hands, and feet all looked like a normal human. There were no fangs or claws. Emosure was secretly surprised. Could it be that after evolving into a corpse ancestor, he would become more like a human? It seemed that the stronger a creature was, the more human-like it would be. So the human form was the most suitable form in the universe? The corpse ancestor was also carefully sizing up Emosure. After a while he opened his mouth and said, "You're that human?" The words that came out of his mouth were actually in human language. Emosure nodded. "Yes." The corpse ancestor paused, then said with a hoarse voice, "I don't want to fight, but I advise you to leave my world immediately." Emosure chuckled and said, "You general corpses destroyed my world. I had no choice but to come to your world to hunt general corpses. Only then can I barely survive." The corpse ancestor said coldly, "Since that's the case, there's no room for discussion?" Emosure made an inviting gesture. "Bring it on." The corpse ancestor said coldly, "This is your last chance." Emosure smiled. "That's what I wanted to tell you." Seeing Emosure being so stubborn, the corpse ancestor's eyes flickered with red light. Then he slowly clenched his right fist. 3 long spikes slowly grew out from the gaps between the 3 fingers of his right fist, a little like Uncle Wolf's claws. However, they were not steel claws but extremely sharp horny claws. At the same time, his left arm rapidly changed and became thicker. A bony defensive layer formed on the surface of his left arm. Overall, his left arm looked like an American shield. Emosure was slightly puzzled when he saw this. At the level of the corpse ancestor, shouldn't the battle be like Star Wars, with lasers flying back and forth? Why was he so primitive, using claws and shields? Emosure tried to plunder the corpse ancestor's memories to take a look. But soon, the system sent a notification: frowny face, plunder failed. Obviously, the corpse ancestor's realm was much higher than Emosure's. Therefore, the chances of failure were higher. Shaking his head, the dragon Salyer suddenly appeared in Emosure's right hand. When the corpse ancestor saw the dragon Salyer in Emosure's hand, he only glanced at the unremarkable blade. However, his body did not move at all. From Emosure's right arm, energy continued to pour into the dragon Salyer. The corpse ancestor still did not move at all. After the dragon Salyer finished charging, Emosure looked at the corpse ancestor. His gaze instantly became sharp. He swung the blade down with his right hand. There was no energy, no sound. The ground beneath the corpse ancestor was directly split open, creating a huge crack that was 10 kilometers long and 300 meters wide. However, the corpse ancestor had already disappeared in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already behind Emosure's back. The sharp claws on his right hand pierced towards Emosure's back. Puff! It instantly pierced through his heart. Emosure was startled. He had yet to regain his senses. Puff! The sharp claws had already been pulled out, and then he waved them again. Shwa! His head had already flown high into the air. At this moment, there was only one thought in Emosure's mind. So damn fast. Only now did he truly understand the corpse ancestor's fighting style. There were no fancy movements, no huge amount of energy. There was only one word: fast. Furthermore, the corpse ancestor had actually used energy. However, he did not release his energy, but instead gathered it on his claws. This would make the claws 100 times sharper. Coupled with his speed, he would be invincible. This was the fighting style of someone who had reached a certain realm. Chapter 527. Corpse ancestor chopped off Emosure's head, but his old bark-like face didn't have the slightest bit of expression. His pair of gray eyes also didn't have a trace of emotion. Instead, he looked at Emosure's headless corpse that was rapidly falling, motionless. And at this moment, another figure appeared behind corpse ancestor without any warning. The moment this figure appeared, A jet-black pig slaughtering knife in his right hand chopped down at corpse ancestor's head. That's right, this person was Immortal. Facing a guy who he had never seen before who was at a higher realm than him. How could Immortal not be prepared at all? The one who had his head chopped off earlier was naturally his clone. At this moment, Immortal suddenly chopped down with his knife. Corpse ancestor's reaction was also extremely fast. Although Immortal was behind him, it was as if he had eyes on his back. His body slanted slightly, dodging Immortal's knife. At the same time, the sharp claws on his right hand directly slashed towards Immortal's abdomen. Immortal hurriedly dodged backwards. With his experience, his dragon-slaughtering knife could only display its greatest power from a distance. If it was in close range, it would be very difficult to display its power. But Corpse Ancestor's battle experience was extremely rich. He didn't give Immortal a chance to escape at all. He directly chased after Immortal. At the same time, his right claws continuously stabbed towards Immortal's chest, eyes and neck. In the past battles, Immortal had mostly relied on his powerful strength or powerful weapons to crush his opponents within 1 or 2 moves. It was very rare for him to fight in close range with an opponent who was slightly stronger than him. For a moment, it was somewhat difficult for him to adapt. He only had the power to parry and didn't have the ability to counterattack. With a single teleport he appeared several hundred meters away. But in the next moment, Corpse Ancestor also teleported over. And the moment he arrived, he was behind Immortal and his sharp claws pierced towards the back of Immortal's head. Immortal suddenly somersaulted forward, dodging this claw. At the same time, his right leg suddenly kicked towards Corpse Ancestor's face as he somersaulted in the air. The shield on Ancestor Corpse's left arm blocked Immortal's kick. And the sharp claws on his right arm struck towards Immortal once again. As Immortal retreated, black dragon scales appeared on his body. This guy's attacks were too fast and fierce. He wasn't very good at close combat, so he really couldn't take it. Ding 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 ding. Just as Immortal's dragon scales covered his entire body, that fellow's sharp claws had already slashed 5 times across Immortal's body. It created a series of sparks. A wisp of surprise flashed on Corpse Ancestor's withered face that seemed to be eternally expressionless like an old tree. However, his hands did not stop moving at all. Since he couldn't do any damage to Immortal's body, the shield on his left arm came in handy. He continued to hit Immortal's body viciously. Bang! It smashed onto Immortal's shoulder. Bang! It landed on Immortal's chest. Bang! It landed on Immortal's head. It landed on Immortal to the point that he felt a bit dizzy. This fellow's shield didn't look heavy, but when it landed on him, it was extremely powerful. It smashed Immortal to the point that he kept falling towards the ground. However, when Immortal was only 500 meters away from the ground, his shield smashed onto Immortal's chest. Bang! This was the most powerful attack. Immortal was smashed into the left side of the mountain. Boom! His entire body sank into the cliff. But before he could react, a voice suddenly rang out. Corpse Ancestor's shield instantly appeared in front of him and smashed towards his chest. Immortal gathered all the energy in his body to his chest, instantly forming an energy shield. He wanted to block this attack. However, just as the shield was about to hit the energy shield, Corpse Ancestor's sharp claws suddenly pierced out, aiming straight for Immortal's eyes. Although Immortal's head was covered in scales, his eyes weren't. At this moment, Immortal instantly understood Corpse Ancestor's plan. This fellow was simply too shrewd. Previously, he kept hitting him with his shield just to numb him, to make him focus all his attention on his shield. However, at this crucial moment, his sharp claws suddenly appeared and pierced towards Immortal's eyes. He was indeed extremely shrewd, but also extremely vicious. Puff! This claw viciously pierced into Immortal's eyes. His entire body was nailed into the stone wall. However, at this moment, another figure had already appeared behind Corpse Ancestor. Another pig slaughtering knife in his hand slashed towards Corpse Ancestor. Corpse Ancestor's figure flashed and disappeared. When he appeared again, he was already behind Immortal. He dodged the pig slaughtering knife. At the same time, he clamped his legs around Immortal's waist. His left arm fiercely strangled Immortal's neck. The sharp claws in his hand pierced towards Emosher's eyes. Emosher learned his lesson this time. He suddenly raised his left arm horizontally in front of his eyes. He blocked the sharp claws. Seeing that his attack failed, Corpse Ancestor's left arm loosened Emosher's grip. At the same time, the shield on his left arm continuously smashed towards Emosher. After a while, this clone of Emosher was also killed. However, soon, another clone of Emosher appeared. Corpse Ancestor didn't care at all at first. After all, many creatures knew the clone technique. This wasn't strange. However, as time passed, his indifference turned into surprise, then shock, then amazement, and finally disbelief. It was already very good for an ordinary creature to have one clone. It was already very rare to have two. He had only heard of creatures that could have 3 to 5 clones, but he had never seen one before. However, this fellow had already killed more than 30 of his clones, and they were still appearing endlessly. Was there no end to this guy's doppelgangers? However, it didn't matter. He didn't believe that his clone wouldn't run out. 50 should be the limit. However, after killing 50 clones, the 51st one quickly jumped out. Then the 60th one. The 70th one. The 80th one. This caused Corpse Ancestor to break down. Others only had 2 or 3 clones, but this fellow already had 80 clones, and they were still jumping out endlessly. Think about it, no matter how strong you were. How would you feel when you encountered such a situation? He killed one after another. He killed 10 after 10. As the saying goes, even if you kill one of me, there will be thousands of me. Wasn't this very frustrating? At the same time, Emosher was enjoying the exposure bath in his own space on Earth. He was enjoying Corpse Ancestor's performance. At the same time, he would occasionally comment, "This clone died so miserably. It was almost smashed into a meat patty. This clone's eyes were pierced through by spikes. Fortunately, it wasn't my main body. Hey, this is too much. You directly let such a long spike go through my mouth and come out from below. Do you have to be so cruel?" In fact, Emosher wasn't just enjoying his clones being killed one by one. He let his clones fight Corpse Ancestor one by one, because he wanted to learn some close combat experience from Corpse Ancestor. Chapter 528. While Corpse Ancestor was killing Emosher's clones, Emosher was hiding in his own space on Earth, leisurely sunbathing. At the same time, he was also learning Corpse Ancestor's fighting style with the help of these clones. Corpse Ancestor's fighting style didn't seem to have any huge energy, nor did it have any destructive power, but every move was extremely dangerous. If he wasn't careful, he would lose his life. If Emosher really fought with Corpse Ancestor, he would have died a long time ago. And this kind of fighting style saved a lot of energy. If they fought like this, everyone could fight for a long time. There was no need to worry about endurance. Finally, after Corpse Ancestor killed Emosher's 100th clone, with a thought, Emosher arrived behind Corpse Ancestor. The moment he appeared, the dragon-slaying saber in his right hand had already silently pierced towards Corpse Ancestor's back. At this time, Corpse Ancestor couldn't remember how many clones he had killed. He was already a little irritated. At this moment, he felt the danger behind him. He turned around abruptly. At the same time that he used his body to spin away from the tip of the saber, the sharp claws on his right arm had already pierced towards Emosher's chest. At this time, Emosher had already adapted to his close combat style. His body also twisted in an extremely strange way, dodging this claw. At the same time, the saber that had already stabbed out, after deviating by a foot, was suddenly pulled back. All of this seemed to take a long time, but in fact, this stab and pull was completed in a short instant. Chi! With a soft sound, the dragon-slaying saber directly cut a 2-inch long wound on Corpse Ancestor's waist. Black blood immediately spurted out. Corpse Ancestor finally had a surprised expression on his face. The strength of his body was definitely not something that could be hurt by a sword. How could this guy's unremarkable saber actually cut his skin? However, he didn't care. His self-healing ability was extremely strong. It was just a superficial wound, so what was it? Thus he continued to fight with Emosher. His shield smashed heavily into Immortal's body from time to time. Immortal's dragon-slaughtering saber also left bloody wounds on his body from time to time. As for Corpse Ancestor, the more he fought, the more shocked he became. First of all, this fellow was more than 10 times stronger than all of the previous clones. From the looks of it, this should be the real body. Secondly, the wounds that this guy had left on his body showed no signs of healing. The wound left behind at the beginning was still bleeding profusely. The black blood that flowed out of the dozens of wounds on his body had long since dyed his entire body black. Seeing that he couldn't kill this guy, and that guy was leaving more and more wounds on his body, he knew that he could not delay any longer. His ultimate move might be able to kill this fellow, but the release of the ultimate move required time to accumulate power. And at this moment, this guy definitely wouldn't give him the time to gather power. Therefore, he could only temporarily flee and avoid the brunt of the attack. Then he hid in the dark and secretly accumulated power. At that time, he would take advantage of the fact that he was unprepared and kill him with a big move. The plan was very good, but would it really work? At this moment, Immortal was smashed to the ground by Corpse Ancestor's shield. Then he quickly flew into the distance. However, Immortal only moved his mind. When Corpse Ancestor flew over a mountain ridge, 2 blood-red chains suddenly extended from the mountain ridge. They instantly shot out like lightning and wrapped around Corpse Ancestor's feet. Corpse Ancestor lowered his head and looked at the 2 blood-red chains. He sneered in his heart. A mere chain actually wanted to bind Corpse Ancestor? As expected, humans were still too naive. Thinking of this, he slashed at the chain on his right foot with his right claw. Ding ding ding. An ear-piercing sound rang out. The blood-red chain emitted a burst of sparks. However, only 3 faint marks appeared on it. There was no sign of it breaking at all. Corpse Ancestor was shocked. His sharp claws could cut through iron like mud and were invincible. But now he couldn't even cut a mere chain. It could be seen that these chains were definitely not ordinary. In fact, these 2 chains were naturally not ordinary. They were Immortal's dragon-binding lasso. Now, Immortal's dragon-binding lasso could appear in many different ways. It could be a single thick chain, or it could be a few or even dozens of chains. In short, it could be freely changed according to Immortal's will. Corpse Ancestor's claw couldn't break it, so he hurriedly tried to use teleportation to escape. However, he had clearly underestimated the power of this dragon-binding lasso. Not only could the dragon-binding lasso trap the opponent, it could also compress the opponent's energy level and strength level to the maximum. As a result, Corpse Ancestor's strength was at most equivalent to a level 10 Grand Desolate Master. It was far from his peak level. At this moment, Immortal flew out from the pit on the ground. Corpse Ancestor expected that this human would definitely fly over. Therefore he said, "Who exactly are you? How can you be so strong?" With these words he numbed Immortal. At the same time he condensed energy in his right arm. He was accumulating energy for his big move. He wanted to release his strongest attack when he was cornered. He wanted to let this lowly human know that Corpse Ancestor was sacred and inviolable. However, Immortal wasn't surprised at all. He stood on the ground and raised his head to look at the bound Corpse Ancestor above the mountain ridge. He held the dragon salyer with both hands that had already been infused with energy, and swept it towards Corpse Ancestor like a golf player. At this moment, a huge gap that was 500 meters wide appeared on the mountain ridge that was 10,000 meters long and 500 meters tall. As for Corpse Ancestor, under the attack of the dragon salyer, he directly turned into a black rain of blood that filled the sky and sprinkled down. The ground below was dyed black. Whoosh! Immortal heaved a sigh of relief. This Corpse Ancestor was really difficult to deal with. But then again, this dragon salyer was really powerful. Corpse Ancestor's strong body couldn't withstand a single attack from the dragon salyer. Of course, he had also learned a lot of combat skills from Corpse Ancestor. In the future, when he encountered a powerful enemy, it wouldn't just be a competition of energy and physical strength. He could use more techniques to defeat his opponent. At this moment, after exterminating Corpse Ancestor, Immortal returned to his own space on Earth. With a thought, he instantly recovered all of his exhausted stamina and energy. Only then did he return to the Thousand Poison Ridge. He looked at the 5 mountain peaks where the corpse general ant nest was located. Then it was time to exterminate these tens of millions of corpse general ants. At the same time, in a cave more than 10,000 kilometers away, the 50 or so tribe leaders and the corpse were looking at a stone wall in front of them. On this stone wall, there were many mountains, forests, rivers, and deserts. It looked like a map. On the map, there were 2 dots of light, one red and one green, moving around. One of the corpse leaders looked at the green dot of light and said, "Corpse, is there a problem with corpse ancestor?" The corpse glared at the corpse leader. "What do you think?" Chapter 529. More than 50 corpse general tribe leaders and corpse ancestor kept looking at the 2 light spots on the map on the stone wall. These 2 light spots were green and red. The green one represented corpse ancestor, and the red one represented that human. After a long while, a tribe leader asked, "Is corpse ancestor all right?" As soon as this was said, the other leaders all turned to look at this leader, as if they were looking at an idiot. Corpse ancestor glared at him. "What do you think?" That tribe leader also felt that he had said something wrong. He quickly took a step back and said, "Corpse ancestor is invincible and invincible. That lowly human is just a little worm in front of corpse ancestor." After saying this, he felt that the tribe leaders had shifted their gazes away from him. He secretly raised his head to take a look, and corpse ancestor's expression became better. However, this tribe leader still had a question in his heart. After hesitating for a moment, he finally made up his mind and asked, "I'm just wondering why we still haven't killed that lowly human after such a long time?" This sentence was the common thought of all the leaders present. Their corpse ancestor was invincible and invincible. This was without a doubt. But why was it that it had been half an hour, and there was still no winner? Was that human so strong that he could withstand corpse ancestor's attacks for half an hour? However, although these leaders were puzzled, they didn't dare to ask. Because as long as they asked, they would be labeled as doubting corpse ancestor by the other leaders. Fortunately, this iron fool asked at this time. They didn't have to worry about it anymore. Corpse ancestor glared at that iron fool again. He said, "You dare to doubt corpse ancestor?" That corpse general leader immediately broke out in cold sweat when he heard this. He quickly knelt down and said, "This subordinate doesn't dare." Corpse ancestor snorted coldly, "I don't think you dare either." Then he turned to look at the light spots on the wall behind him and said, "Maybe corpse ancestor is deliberately playing with this guy." As soon as these words were said, the other leaders seemed to have found a reasonable explanation. They were all relieved. Corpse ancestor is wise. We are far inferior to corpse ancestor. Corpse ancestor hasn't appeared for a long time. It's rare for him to come out, so of course he wants to relax. That guy is like corpse ancestor's prey. Corpse ancestor will play with him for the time being. When I'm done playing, I'll kill him. All the tribal leaders had relaxed and joyful expressions on their faces. But soon, the smile on the leader's face froze. He pointed at the map on the stone wall, and was at a loss for words. Corpse ancestor. Corpse ancestor. All the corpse generals turned their heads to look. Soon after, all of the corpse commanders were dumbfounded, and their expressions were exactly the same as the iron and simple-minded leader. Even the corpse widened its gray eyes. His gray eyes were filled with disbelief and incredulity. Because the green dot on the stone wall map had been extinguished, what did this mean? The corpse ancestor's life force vanished. This thought made the corpse generals look as if they had seen a ghost. As far as they knew, the corpse ancestor was immortal. It was said that the corpse ancestor had lived for over 30,000 years, and he would live forever. But now he was dead. How was this possible? They couldn't believe it. They didn't want to believe it. How did corpse ancestor die? However, the light spots would not lie. Their stone wall map was a special corpse tool refined by the corpse ancestor. As long as it captured the aura of a certain creature, and then controlled the aura into the stone wall map, it would be able to see the location and life force of that creature. The location on the map represented the location of that creature. The light spots on the map represented the life force of that creature. For 30,000 years, this light spot had never been wrong. Something refined by the corpse ancestor could never be wrong. In other words, the corpse ancestor's life force had already vanished. The corpse ancestor was dead. This caused the higher-ups of the corpse generals to be both terrified and confused. After a long while, the iron and simple-minded leader asked, "Corpse leader, what do we do now?" The corpse leader pondered for a long while before speaking. "Hide." The moment these words were spoken, the corpse generals all looked at the corpse leader in shock. In their eyes, humans were lowly and insignificant insects. But now they, the corpse generals, had to hide for the sake of a mere human. This was simply a huge joke. But at this moment, none of the corpse generals could laugh. They all knew how serious the situation was. If the corpse ancestor was truly dead, then the human on the surface was so powerful that it was simply unimaginable. Facing such an enemy, what else could they do? They could only hide. The corpse leader said, "Before we confirm the whereabouts of the corpse ancestor, no one is allowed to appear in front of that human." All the leaders had solemn expressions as they replied, "Yes." After the corpse leader finished speaking, he turned to look at the blood-red light spot on the stone wall map. They had sacrificed so many corpse generals to lure this fellow to the Myriad Poisons Ridge. They had originally thought that the poisonous creatures in the Myriad Poisons Ridge would definitely not let this fellow live for more than 2 days. In the end, they had not expected this fellow to survive in the Myriad Poisons Ridge for so long. He had even gone on a killing spree in the Myriad Poisons Ridge. And now they suspected that he had even killed the corpse ancestor. How could this human be so powerful? At this moment, Immortal was in the air above the Myriad Poisons Ridge, looking down at the 5 mountain peaks that were shaped like human fingers. These 5 mountain peaks were like the 5-finger mountains of Tathagata. The basin below was like a palm. Within these 5 mountain peaks were 5 general corpse ant nests. And according to his investigation, the corpse ant queen lived under the ground of the palm. Immortal was not interested in the ant queen. Previously, when he killed the corpse ancestor, he only obtained a mere 10 slaughter points. So now he wanted quantity, not quality. The tens of millions of corpse general ants in the ant nests were his true target. However, these corpse general ants were well organized. At most, only one ant nest would have all the corpse general ants come out. In that case, he would have to waste 5 demon suppressing orbs. So that was only a last resort. As for the best plan, Immortal had already thought of it. At this moment, he teleported and arrived at the ant nest under the giant palm. This was a large hall that was several thousand square meters in size. The floor, walls, and ceiling of the hall were crawling with corpse general ants the size of house cats. Immortal raised his eyes and looked around. These corpse commander ants were squeezing together. There were countless of them. However, although there were many corpse general ants, they were not in a mess. On the contrary, they were entering and exiting in an orderly manner. It was as if there was someone directing the traffic. Upon closer inspection, each corpse general ant had a pair of sharp little clamps on its head. It was like a pair of scissors that could easily cut rocks into pieces. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.